listening to The Rick Smith Show. For information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any part of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A Walmart worker is suing the company for denying health insurance benefits to spouses of gay employees. The suit seeks national class action status against Walmart. Jackie Coate is the plaintiff. She says Walmart denied health insurance benefits to her spouse, Diana Smithson, and that resulted in $150,000 in medical debt. The suit alleges violation of gender discrimination laws. Coate says Walmart repeatedly denied Coate's request to add Smithson to Coate's Walmart health insurance plan. Smithson was diagnosed with cancer in 2012 and is now in hospice care. Walmart so far has said only that its benefits coverage policy was legal. The Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, GLAAD, filed this lawsuit and says it believes other companies with policies similar to Walmart may also be vulnerable to legal challenges. A Southern California-based supermarket chain has been ordered by the state's labor commissioner to pay over $180,000 in fines for wage theft violations. Next week, El Super grocery store chain will face additional labor violation claims at the federal level. Monica Lopez has more from Los Angeles.
A California state labor investigation found that 20 El Super grocery store employees worked off the clock, were denied full rest periods, and were not compensated for overtime work. On July 20th, the National Labor Relations Board is scheduled to hear additional claims of labor violations, including allegations of wage theft in vacation policy, coercion and intimidation of employees, and what the UFCW is calling the illegal firing of former El Super cashier Fermin Rodriguez. Rodriguez says he was fired from his position after 9 years on the job for speaking out about how he and some of his co-workers were treated by store management. He says, "The store manager yelled at me in front of the customers saying I was too slow, but I knew I was doing good work because my customers were happy with the service I gave them. The problem was that the store manager liked to harass the staff working at El Super." United Food and Commercial Workers Local 770 and their supporters are in the midst of a boycott of the store's 49 locations. Last week, supporters rallied at stores in California, Arizona, and Nevada. Monica Lopez, Workers Independent News, Los Angeles.
Workers Independent News is made possible in part through underwriting support from the United Steelworkers and from the OPEIU, the Office of Professional Employees International Union.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, healthcare, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore."
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they're still right on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. So I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Orange, the New Black. Interesting series going on over at the Netflix. There is a labor theme in the undercurrent of the the women prison film and series that I think very important. So we're going to talk to someone who wrote a nice article on why that's important. Also going to talk a little bit about the labor news of the day, the budget, pension schemes, liquor privatization, all of that insanity. But first, but foremost, but hysterically, the chopper man himself, Scott Wagner, the helicopter pilot extraordinaire, in the news today, and kind of interestingly enough, I've often thought of him as kind of a voyeur, kind of a peeping Tom kind of thing, that kind of creepy around the corner, looking down on you. That frame has always been kind of there when you look at him, and now it's kind of in the eye. I had some cameras put outside his office and hid them very non-conspicuously. Put 2 big fire extinguishers out in the hallway, and then duct taped the camera packs onto the platform, onto the little holder things. Like no one could possibly ever wonder why there would be a fire extinguisher in the marble hallway. I don't know. Why would you put that there? And someone took a videotape. Our Capitol reporter, Sean, went over, took some pictures, asked a bunch of questions. And, turns out, and this is really something I think very disturbing in the state Senate here, because I think there's going to be the starting of the paranoid caucus. Last week, we talked with John Eichelberger about his paranoid fantasies. And now you've got Senator Scott Wagner with his paranoia. And, I don't know that it's not expected. I don't know that, people who are used to getting their own way and pointing their finger and saying jump, and people do, moving into government and not having people have that same level of, I said, I dictated, and people hop to, that, folks call their office and complain. People say, when they see him on the street, say, I don't like what you're doing. I think they see that as harassment, as intimidation, as thuggery, instead of just the democratic process. And to me, it's another one of those things that I think our Republican leadership doesn't understand what democracy is. They understand dictatorship. They understand authoritarian rule. They understand you do what I tell you or else. That's what they understand. So was I surprised last week when we talked to Senator Eichelberger about people calling his office, expressing their dismay, their dislike, expressing the fact that what he and his fellow Republicans are doing is radical, extreme changes that no one thinks is good, except the ideologues and the team sport folks. So I'm interested, and I think it's really kind of telling that, in back-to-back weeks, we've had these moments of paranoia. Now, when Wagner's office was asked why they installed cameras in the hallway, understand, the people, I think they're kind of new. Women, wanted to stay away from the hallway because who knows, maybe he was looking up their skirts. Maybe he's even more of a voyeur than I thought. And maybe we're on the precipice of Peepergate. I don't know. But the thing is the response that they gave is that people were knocking over our signs. And I go, what? Because if you don't know, and if you haven't been into the Senate area, in the hallway in the Senate building, it's a pretty decent size hallway. It's not immense, but it's pretty decent size. He puts out these big, massive signs. And it's always some snarky something or other about the governor being like Kool-Aid Man, or the president of the AFL-CIO makes $1 million a year, or some obnoxious number. And my favorite one was he went through a whole bunch of things that, liberals want this and this, and at the end he basically confirmed all of this, which is kind of twisted. But he puts these massive signs out in the hallway, and he claims people are knocking them over. Vandals. The union thugs are coming to vandalize my sign, is what we're supposed to believe, I guess. Instead of, you just put this obnoxious sized sign out in the middle of the damn hallway, and when people are trying to get down the hallway, it's in the way. Maybe they get knocked over. Now, I got a bunch of questions. And a bunch of those questions starts with how long have the cameras been there? And if they've been there any significant amount of time, how many times have your signs been knocked over? Who was it? I mean, if this is where we're going, if that's your claim, they're knocking our signs over all the time. Well, if the cameras have been out there, you should have caught something if it's all the time, right? One would think about this. So what bothers me is now you've got, the potential of Peepergate, a state senator who wants to look up the staffers' dresses. And of course, Union Vandalgate, because those union thugs are knocking over his sign. But to me, something more troublesome out of this, showing his willingness really to invade people's privacy and to really use technology and all of this stuff and at the drop of a hat to really infringe on our civil liberties. Now, think about this from the guy who, and the reason I bring that up is this guy is, it's no secret, he wants to be governor. Well, he actually wants to be king, I think. But governor is the next step to, I guess, in his mind, to kingdom. So think about it for a second. You've got this guy who's now, first step, we're going to go out in the helicopter and look down on you peons and say, everything's fine from down here, from up here. And then the cameras, a lot of stuff that I find very odd, very, very weird. And, the reality is does Pennsylvania have, its own Richard Nixon? Because recording everything, looking down on everyone, constantly over your shoulder, talking about Big Brother and being Big Brother. That, I got to tell you, is very worrisome to me. And as I look at the paranoia that is, and look, I guarantee you, the Eichelbergers of the world, the Wagners of the world, the Cormans, the rest of them, I guarantee you they are getting flooded with phone calls of their constituents saying, I don't like what you're doing. Your budget is terrible. The pension scheme was horrible. The liquor privatization scheme was just dumb. Stop it. I'm certain of it. I'm certain their phones are flooded. And they're not used to that. They're not used to that kind of constituent engagement. And to them, it must seem like they're being intimidated or harassed. To them, it must seem like they're everywhere, those citizens. It must seem like that. But at the end of the day, when you do radical, extreme things like they are doing, if you gut the spending and the funding for people's children and their education, you're going to get a response. If you're stealing from workers who have paid into a pension fund, they're going to be angry and they are going to let you know. That's what being part of this gig is. And when you're out to do radical, extreme things, you should expect some pushback. And what I find interesting and really, really interesting in my conversation with John Eichelberger last week kind of highlighted this a little bit. The T-Twits, they did this amazingly. Only they were a lot more threatening than teachers are. I remember some of those town hall meetings. If you remember 2010, these were folks who at any second, I was expecting someone to pull out the MAC-10 and just and cut down a room. I don't know that the teacher's going to red ink you to death. They might write a scathing mail. They might write something scathing, but I don't think they're coming in with a MAC-10. So I find it interesting, the Scott Wagners of the world, the Tea Party, the people who rode the Tea Party anger into office, that they're now turning around and saying, oh, I got to watch because they're knocking over my sign. Wow. Very just... I would laugh, and I think it's hysterical if it weren't so sad. Just is what it is. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. Also, the budget when we come back. I think that's important since, the good senator has a lot of time for putting up cameras, not much time for actually doing his freaking job. We'll talk about that. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, and we are going all the way back to the year 1381. That was the day John Ball, the leader of the Peasants' Revolt in England, was executed. Due to the plague, the Black Death, in 1348, many peasants had died. Land was plentiful and laborers were scarce. The authorities responded with emergency legislation, the Ordinance of Laborers in 1349 and the Statute of Laborers in 1351. These laws fixed wages at pre-plague levels and punished employers trying to outbid their competitors. Local lords had the right to prevent serfs from leaving their manors. To raise money for the ongoing 100 Years' War with France, Parliament levied a new tax on every person over the age of 14. This was especially unpopular among the peasant class. The church sided with the wealthy landowners. As a result, some priests rebelled against the church's hierarchy. John Ball was one of these rebels, and for his rebellion, he was imprisoned at Maidstone Castle. The initial outbreak of the Peasants' Revolt occurred in 1380. The people rose up against the new tax. One tax collector was beaten and driven from the village of Fawbury. The Chief Justice, sent to calm the peasants, suffered a similar fate. Word spread, and uprisings occurred throughout England. Rebels in Kent besieged Maidstone Castle and freed John Ball. Troops were dispatched around the country to suppress the revolt. John Ball was hung, drawn and quartered in the marketplace, as an example to any other potential rebels. The Peasants' Revolt was crushed, but Parliament gave up trying to control peasant wages and stopped collecting the poll tax. Many peasants were now considered free men, no longer owned by landowners. All of these things helped to end the feudal system. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. Right-wing media praised Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker ahead of his announcement that he will seek the Republican nomination for president. On Fox News' The Five, Dana Perino touted Walker's popularity with right-wing radio hosts as an asset.
So Scott Walker, not only does he have the support of a lot of people across the board, Rush Limbaugh has been a fan of his for a long time, and a lot of people got to know about Scott Walker in the lead up to this election because of that program and the coverage that he got in Weekly Standard and Wall Street Journal, things like that.
On Fox's Outnumbered, host Andrea Tantaros had similar comments.
The way he took on the unions, turned a huge budget deficit into a surplus. He's not afraid, and he started this national movement against the unions, which was epic.
As did Fox News' Britt Hume on America's Newsroom.
They look at Walker out in Wisconsin and they see that boy, he took on, in a tough state, he took on some tough opponents and won.
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
All the things you want are real. You have you to complete, and there is no deal.
Yes, stand and be videotaped if you're standing out in the hallway in front of Scott Wagner's office, because you might tip over his sign. He puts those signs there for your protection. And those thugs, those union thugs, I'll bet you they're the ones. Doing it, the same ones who are following John Eichelberger around wherever when he goes running. Yeah. I got to tell you, I'm feeling the sense of some paranoia going on there, and I'm waiting for the paranoid caucus to kick off. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So let's find out some other thoughts on the paranoid gate, or as I'm calling it, it's Peeper Gate, because I think he's looking up the dresses of the young staffers. Just my thought, and that's why I've asked our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson, to come talk with us. Erwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here, Rick. Thanks.
So I'm looking at this, and is there anything that says that he can put cameras wherever he wants?
I don't think there's anything that says he, as an official of our government, of your government and mine, has any right to electronically eavesdrop on anyone without a court order or some judicial oversight of some sort. We have in place in Pennsylvania an electronic eavesdropping and wiretap statute. It's quite a different thing than if, for example, we were dealing with a well-known, open, and notorious on-display traffic control device camera that everybody gets very upset about, but we know where they are and when they are, and we know there's a law enforcement purpose to this kind of activity. But with Scott Wagner, I don't see any law enforcement, but I do see somebody who's a government official apparently acting under color of law, recording things in our Capitol building. That's not his personal office. That's our office that we make available to him.
Correct.
And it's not as if he has a sign out front saying you're being taped now, where I would have some right as a citizen to determine whether or not I want to be within the ambit of his cameras.
Good point. My question also is, does it have audio recording? Because, there's part of me that goes, he's so paranoid. In my view, that he is a paranoid guy who wants to know what people are saying about him when he leaves his office. That was my first thought. This nonsense about, people are knocking over my sign. That just seems to be nonsense to me.
Well, the whole thing is nonsense. Let's get real here. We're talking about the guy who is guilty of repetitive hate speech. This is somebody who stood in the well of our People's Senate, who then stood in the well of our Capitol building rotunda, who then used our public airwaves to repeatedly refer to democratically elected union leadership representatives of their members as like Adolf Hitler. There's no more plain articulation of hate speech than that. And this is the same guy who said he was going to sit in the back of the Pennsylvania Senate chamber, the people's legislative body, with a baseball bat. So if people have some reason to be fearful with respect to relationships and Scott Wagner, it's fear of the relationship in the context of what he has indicated he is capable of doing or willing to do, not the reverse.
Yeah, I'm with you. But is there anything that, because the more this is coming out, the more I'm hearing about this. Is there any way that we, the people, can get copies of the tapes that he's taking? Because there's the other part of this is, I've been calling the potential Peeper Gate. Is he looking up the skirts of female staffers walking by? How do we get a hold of this information, since he is a public official?
Well, I think since he's a public official and this is taking place in a public building, maybe the place to start is for somebody to ask the Capitol Police to look into this and conduct an independent investigation. I am not ready or willing or even contemplating the idea that this is a salacious or sexually driven kind of activity. I can't imagine a state senator appropriately being involved in that kind of conduct.
At least we'd hope.
So I wouldn't be among those people asserting that maybe he's looking up staffers' skirts. So that would be way past anything I would be prepared to say. But if he is listening in, eavesdropping on anything that would be free speech in the people's capital, remember that the right to free speech and the right to free assembly, which would be something that he is apparently monitoring with his cameras in the People's Capitol building, are all guaranteed by the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. And when the government or its agents, like a state senator, impede or interfere with that right, there's a serious, serious issue.
Because I look at this and I got to be honest, I'm kind of weirded out. This is a guy who wants to be governor. I mean he wants to be king, but he wants to be governor. And the arbitrary use of this technology is kind of frightening to me, and I think should be frightening to the citizens of this Commonwealth.
Well, I think it's arbitrary, capricious level.
Yeah, I think we've lost him. No, I look at this, and the reality is to me, I just throwing this camera up. I got to know if there's audio to this. That's one of those things we have to absolutely find out if there's an audio component to this, and what he used it for. I think it's important to know how long it's been going on, and I think he's right. I think Irwin is absolutely right that we need to be checking, find somebody to get with the Capitol Police and to maybe start an investigation. And Irwin, I got you back on the line, right?
Yes, absolutely. We had a little technical glitch, but we repaired it, and we're back. Clearly the Capitol Police and possibly the state police need to be looking into this. But I want to know, I mean, is he using the people's electricity to run his equipment? Is he reimbursing us for that? Is he paying rent for the hallway that is not assigned to him? He had an office assigned to him, not the hallway outside of his office. Is he paying the people back rent for that? If not, it's theft of government property. And his willingness to, after the fact, pay it doesn't take away the theft.
Now, the claim is that, someone's knocking over my sign, which sounds kind of childish. Oh, someone's knocking over my sign. My first thought is, as I've seen these large obnoxious signs that are blocking the hallway, and I'm sure somebody could have knocked them over once, just trying to get around in the hallway because there are people there. Is he allowed to put these big obnoxious signs up in the hallway to begin with?
Well, I think that's the threshold question. I mean, this is not his private hallway. This is the people's hallway, the public hallway. If you recall, a couple of months back, there was a big brouhaha when people had posted billboards on public property in Cumberland County with respect to the then state police commissioner designate. And after an investigation was undertaken of his having torn those signs down, the conclusion of the district attorney was that some people exercised bad judgments on a couple of sides of that equation, but nothing illegal was done by taking them down. So if that's the standard on public roadways, it must be the standard also in the People's Capitol building. So the first question is, what right does he have to post these signs? And second of all, what interest does he have in not his private office that is made available to him at taxpayer expense, but in the public hallway in the public building that was not intentionally made available to him for this purpose? And it's available to all of us. That hallway is not his. It's not anyone's of ours. It's all of ours.
Exactly.
An undivided interest that we all have in public property. We paid for it. We continue to pay for it. And he's appropriated it for his private and apparently political purposes, because remember, those signs about which he is so concerned now first appeared not as a government issue item, but as a private political mailing and emailing to his supporters and constituents. I happen to have gotten a copy of it when that first took place. And at that juncture, it was pretty clear that this was a politically motivated, politically charged undertaking, not a government function, but he was doing it as a government official and therefore under color of state law. And I have some real serious concerns about that.
As I think we all should.
This is not a constitution that he has a right to unilaterally interpret for his own purposes. This is our constitution, and this is our government, and this is our Capitol building. And he indeed, whether we like him or not, is our senator. And when he acts this way, we need to sanction, restrict, look into, protect ourselves from him.
So let me ask you this, Erwin, because last week I spent a bit of time on my State Senator John Eichelberger, and his apparent paranoia of people calling him and talking to him on the streets. Now this week we get this. How much of this stuff is distraction from the real issues we've got a budget that's still not done, and we have a legislature that's nowhere to be found. To me, that's while all the talk of the cameras and all this stuff, the budget, they're still not doing their job. That's what's frustrating to me as well.
Well, I think that you're hitting on two parallel issues, and I say parallel because they're happening at the same time, and they're very scary. One is we are beginning to see a pattern here that's very, very troublesome. This sounds so much like the paranoia of the McCarthy era, coming from people who have demonstrated a proclivity in our society while holding high public office to act in McCarthyite kinds of ways. And that's one aspect of it, and it's very scary. And for those who are a year or two or three younger than I and who haven't necessarily invested in reading history, Senator Joseph McCarthy had decided that there was a communist conspiracy in our country, and he engaged in a process that got to be known as red baiting, and he destroyed people's lives as well as their careers and their families by suggesting that they needed to take loyalty oaths, by interrogating people in congressional hearings before the United States Senate, that ultimately came to be known as the Army McCarthy hearings. And an extraordinary patriot, attorney Joseph Welch, finally broke Senator McCarthy and his red baiting, family destroying, anti-American, unconstitutional conduct. But it took a televised hearing to do so, at which Joe Welch ultimately said, "Senator, at long last, have you no shame? Have you no sense of decency?" As Senator McCarthy tried to destroy a war hero on one of his witness stands. And we're seeing that again from Senator Eichelberger with his allegations that union people are following him around, and with Senator Wagner, who is using my Capitol building, your Capitol building, to exploit this kind of thought process and instill hate in people and suspicion among others within our communities, and have people be divided, this terrible politics of division. So that's one. But the other is much more significant in a short run concept, and you pointed out. The Pennsylvania Constitution really only has one absolute and affirmative duty on the Pennsylvania General Assembly, and that's to adopt a budget periodically. And they haven't adopted a budget that's been signed into law since or prior to the expiration of the earlier budget, which expired on June 30th of this year. And lo and behold, they went home, and they're not coming back until September. They're picking up their paychecks for not doing their job, for abandoning or abusing their constitutional duty. It seems to me, and I think it seems to any number of other observers, that the leadership of the House and the leadership of the Senate that's controlled by the Republican Party must be working with the governor and the governor's office that's controlled by the Democratic Party to reach some kind of budget that's acceptable to all players. And the failure to do so, and they're leaving town, leaving Harrisburg, leaving the Capitol, except for Wagner's television camera, I guess, is astounding.
It is astounding. And, the thing that gets me on this is, they talk about running government like a business. They talk about, how important the taxpayers' dollars are and how fiscally responsible they are. But in all of their deeds, the antithesis of all of that.
Well, if government is to be run by a business, when somebody is AWOL, they get fired by a business. Even Donald Trump did that. So maybe that's what they mean when they say we ought to be running government like a business. Maybe what should happen is when people abandon their jobs openly and notoriously and tell their employer, that's us, we're going home before the job is done, maybe that's the time that their pay should be suspended. Maybe that's the time that they should be suspended.
Yep, I'm with you. But, and going back to your analogy with the McCarthy era, I do see that in Senator Wagner. I can easily see him and Daryl Metcalf and the rest of the Klan being in that same frame when you're talking about union members and these fantasies of harassment and intimidation that they have in their heads. I think that's a big part of their paranoia.
Well, I don't think there's any question that's a big part of their paranoia. And the question really gets to be whether this is true paranoia, which needs to be treated by an appropriate medical professional, or if it's political paranoia, which is aimed at evading the real responsibilities and addressing the real issues of children getting an education, of people having access to health care, of our bridges and our roads being fixed, and in our school buildings being made safe, and our senior citizens being made available, and playgrounds and basketball courts being available to our kids. Evading all of that and instead worrying about how can we outlaw union organizing or criminalize the people who engage in that protected conduct? How can we take unemployment insurance benefits away from people who work for a living and are laid off through no fault of their own? How we can cheat people out of workers' compensation benefits when they are hurt in an effort to earn a living? Those seem to be the priorities right now. And this is all diversionary junk as far as I'm concerned.
Me too.
And it's really very scary. So there's only one of two possible answers. One is that they're engaged in grotesque, politically motivated activity at taxpayers' expense. Or the other is that they have serious psychiatric issues that need to be professionally addressed.
At which point, I think the taxpayer would be happy to get them the treatment that they need with their taxpayer.
Well, the taxpayers have already
healthcare.
paid for the treatment that they need, Rick. That's the point. They all have great health care, unlike the rest of us.
Exactly where I was going. I'm sure we would be happy to continue paying their health care while they got the treatment that they need.
So, these are huge problems, and I think that they have some explaining to do. And this, by the way, I'm not particularly a partisan, and you know that. I am registered as a Democrat, but neither of the two major political parties is particularly representative of everything in which I believe. But this particular topic upon which we discuss and debate now, this leaving town without the job being complete, that's exclusively in the hands of the majority party, because the majority party sets the calendar and the agenda in both the state house and the state senate.
Right.
The minority party does not have any voice in when they begin, when they end, when they start, when they leave, when they go home, and when they stay here to play. And so the leadership in the House, Speaker Terzai, the leadership in the Senate, Senate President Pro Tem Scarnati, and the floor leaders of the Republican Party, along with people like Wagner and Eichelberger, who are having their bouts of paranoia at the moment, union, anti-worker, anti-people paranoia in particular, are all the ones who are responsible for this fundamental, basic reality that they went home.
They took their ball and they went home. I'm with you.
Last night, after they had decided to go home, the reason that I'm able to speak about this so passionately in such an immediate fashion is I was walking in downtown Harrisburg last evening at around 7 o'clock, and I ran into the House Democratic floor leadership, Representative and House Minority Leader Frank Dermody, and Representative Joseph Markosik, who is the Democratic chair of the House Appropriations Committee. And I ran into Senator Fontana, a Democrat of Allegheny County, who was in town. They were here. They were ready to work. Okay. And they had no work that could be done because the Republican leadership had recessed the building.
And maybe we should be calling their office and harassing them some more with, why don't you go back to work?
Well, maybe in Wagner's case, it's a good thing. Maybe the Capitol Police can conduct an investigation of his misappropriation of the Capitol building for his private taping service while he's away. And maybe that way they could get it done without his interruption or interference.
Well, that's a good point. And I'm sure this is something that we're going to be keeping an eye on for the next several days as this continues. And I'd love to have you come back and give us your thoughts as it moves along.
Well, as long as this one's playing, I'll be thinking.
Alrighty.
So absolutely. Happy to come back.
Thanks so much, Erwin.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We need a president who on day one will approve the Keystone Pipeline.
Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker jumps into the 2016 race. We'll report his predictable position on climate change. Warmest June on record for the western United States. ExxonMobil knew about man-made global warming in 1981 and then funded climate deniers for 30 years. Plus,
Jiggery-pokery from the climate science deniers and the right wing.
no, we are not headed to a new mini ice age. The latest denialist theory debunked.
All of that debunking and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
As you may know, following torrential rains, the River Raisin crested today. That flooding recently caused the Monroe Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant to discharge some partially treated sewage. Remember, the sewage is only partially treated, so until further notice, please do not drink any sewage.
Thank you for that advice, Mr. Colbert. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, candidate number 15 entered the GOP race this week.
Yep, 15, count them, 15. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker announced on Monday that he is seeking the Republican presidential nomination for 2016. He is the 15th Republican to do so. We've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the 2016 candidates. Now, Walker isn't sure that humans have anything to do with it, and in his official campaign launch speech, he said it shouldn't be a priority.
President Obama declared, he proclaimed that the greatest threat to future generations is global warming, climate change. Well, Mr. President, I respectfully disagree. The greatest threat to future generations is radical Islamic terrorism, and we need to do something about it.
You know, he's no scientist.
So true. Walker also walks the Republican Party line on oil and gas drilling, as well as on coal and nuclear.
We need to put in place an all-the-above energy policy that says we're going to use the abundance of what God has given us here in America and on this continent.
And on this continent, of course, he means the tar sands up in Canada.
Yep.
Which is not exactly U.S. produced, but his buddies, the Koch brothers, are going to make a lot of money out of it.
He also threw in something for the Keystone XL pipeline.
We need a president who on day one will approve the Keystone Pipeline.
I love how those people in Wisconsin cheer for the Keystone XL pipeline that brings them no actual money, does not lower their gas price, and probably makes them sick and maybe kills the planet. But other than that, yay!
And so far, Walker is like pretty much all of the 14 other Republican candidates. Meanwhile, it was the hottest June on record for 5 western states. California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Utah got really hot this June, breaking that record. And that's according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. A revealing new report shows oil giant ExxonMobil has known since 1981 that its product causes dangerous man-made global warming. In a blockbuster new report by the Union of Concerned Scientists on Climate Disinformation, a former Exxon engineer reveals that Exxon's leadership was first informed way back in 1981 that burning its fossil fuels would cause dangerous global warming. Despite that knowledge, Exxon, the world's biggest oil company, spent millions over the next 30 years to promote climate denial.
Well, if you can't beat it, deny it.
Yep. And the latest myth from the climate change denial industry is one you'll probably like. It's that the Earth is headed for a new mini ice age. Of course, reality turns out to be not so much. The right-wing denial media are misreporting a new study that actually doesn't suggest anything of the kind, as physicist Joe Rome of Climate Progress explained on the broadcast earlier this week.
This study doesn't mean anything about the long predicted global warming trend. All this study says is we have a theory, a brand new theory that says maybe there'll be a reduction in sunspots in the 2030s. And anybody who cites this study to suggest that global warming science isn't real or somehow we are going to avoid catastrophic warming this century literally has never talked to a climate scientist.
Well, of course these right-wing news outlets don't talk to climate scientists because these guys would tell them they're absolutely wrong and they need to glom on to whatever nonsense, whatever single study they come across and misinterpret it to their ends. That's what they do. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
You might as well be walking on the sun. Might as well be walking on the sun. Might as well be walking on the sun.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm just an average man with an average life. I work from 9 to 5. Hey, hell, I pay the price. All I want is to be left alone in my average home. But why do I always feel like I'm in the twilight zone? And I always feel like somebody's watching me, and I have no privacy.
Oh, yes, it must be sad to have that kind of paranoia that always somebody's watching you. Or in the Scott Wagner case, he's watching you. How do you feel about that? You think it's a good thing that our state senator puts up the cameras in the hallway because, someone might knock over his sign? I got to tell you, there's a lot to this, and I think that there's got to be an investigation in this. I want to know why. I want to know who approved it. I want to know who's in and out. I want to see the tape. I think at some point this should be its own investigation. And will the governor appoint a special prosecutor?
I am not sure, but you know what I'm doing right now?
What are you doing right now?
I am getting a right to know request completed, and we're going to try to do this, Rick.
As we should. And the other thing that I want to try and do, I think I want to put a camera up in front of Scott Wagner's door to make sure that his signs are okay.
Maybe we could place a fern on the other side and stick the camera inside the fern.
There we go.
Not just duct tape it to a fire extinguisher holder. I don't know.
Or just put it on a tripod and leave it right there and at least be obvious about it. I mean, to me, the hiding of it is just as bad as the camera itself. The fact that you tried to cover it up and tried to hide it, to me, there's an awful lot there.
Yeah, and one of the things that really gets me going is they're calling this vandalism. Tipping over a sign is vandalism. I don't know.
You might dent the corner.
Okay. But, to me, vandalism is...
throwing a brick through your window. That's vandalism.
Slashing tires, throwing a brick through the window, key in your car, spray painting something. To me, that's vandalism. But, if they want to play this game, we should play it back.
Absolutely. No, this is something that can't be let go. I mean, too many times this senator has gotten away with insanity. Really, honestly, those union people are like Putin and Hitler. I'm going to sit in the back of the room with a baseball bat and I'll get things done. And now this, at what point do you go, You know, in the game of baseball, 3 strikes, you're out. At some point, don't we look to insanity and go, you know what? Bring in the guys with the white jackets. Bring in, the sleeveless coat there to take them away in something.
Yeah, and the messaging coming out of this is pretty awesome. Scott Wagner and the Senate Republicans care more about a freaking sign than they do about passing a budget.
Yeah,
they care more about a sign that costs maybe $5 or $10 than your kids getting a good high school education. How do you feel about that as a constituent or as a parent?
It's a really nice sign. No, I mean, it's just nuts, and it doesn't even compare. But it does. I think you're right. It does show just the level of insanity there.
Yeah, this place, 7 months here. This is one of the craziest things I've seen. One of the more insane or silly things I've seen here. I mean, this is coming from someone who's supposed to be a statesman.
Yeah, no, you've misused that word. I don't think he would even consider himself a statesman. But here's the thing. I mean, everyone says, the General Assembly is kind of like high school. This is one of those high school pranks. This is what you would expect from the class clown. This is what you would expect from the doofus. And yet he's a sitting state senator, which to me is scary on a whole number of levels. But it's just like high school. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah,
I'm going to put up my sign. They're going to tip over my sign.
And I was talking to a couple of people, they were going by, and frankly, what I heard was that some of the women were concerned about getting upskirt pictures.
Of course they are.
I mean, and there was actually a lady walked out of the office. She was not a staffer. She was filling in for the week for someone who was on vacation. And we asked her, are you concerned about these cameras here? And she had the look of bewilderment on her face. She was like, what cameras? And we had a camera there. I was like, there's a camera right there, and there's a camera right there. Would you like to talk about? She said no, because she doesn't want to lose.
You don't want to get fired.
Doesn't want to lose her job. But she was stunned when she saw it. She said, wait, and she turned around and looked at Scott Wagner's door, and she's like, they're going in here? And we're like, yeah.
And
she was just like, I had to work for this guy for the past week.
See, now I really don't think that it's about the signs. And maybe it's just me being a little, reading a little more into this. I got to think this guy's so paranoid that he wants to, and there's got to be an audio component to this somewhere. But I would think there's part of me that goes, when people leave his office and they go to each other, boy, he was a real doofus. To me, that's I think the information he really wanted. That invasive information. When people leave your office, all the things they say about you when they're standing in the hallway. And you got to wonder how many state legislators are going to be going now. We were talking in front of that door. We don't want that stuff known. That's why I think the tapes have to be made public.
Yeah, and that's why I'm following this right to know request. It would be really great to see who goes in and out this door. How many times did Matt Briette go in there?
That's a good point.
How many times did Nathan Benefield go in there? People from the Marcellus Shale lobby. It would be great seeing who walks in and out of that office on a regular basis, too.
Which is why I think we should have the right to have a camera, and we should put it up online. I mean, that's what we should be thinking about doing.
How do we a live stream going?
How do we have a live stream that every day we get to see who's going in and out of Scott Wagner's office? I think that's a great idea. I think we should probably look into that.
Or instead of having that guy who sits downstairs with the pension stuff, we should just have someone sitting on a chair all day with their legs crossed, folded over, and just taking a picture of just like everyone that goes in and out of Scott Wagner's office. Because that would probably just really make him paranoid. And sit there, maybe have like an old-fashioned camera, you gotta put like the hood over your head.
Yeah, it's got to be really obnoxious. It can't just be a cell phone or something. It's got to be, I've got a video camera is probably 25 years old. It's just big, massive monstrosity. We should put that on the big tripod right out there, and then have a camera on that because someone might knock it over.
Or no, hook it up to a computer screen and have it facing the door so they could,
so they see themselves like you're walking out of a 7-Eleven or something.
Yeah.
No, I mean you can make light of this, and it's kind of funny, to be honest with you, that it's gotten to be this petty, this ticky-tack, this minor, this ridiculous. They knocked over my sign. I just can't get that out of my head.
For someone who wants to take a bat to all the senators,
exactly. Someone who's going to make terroristic threats. He
complains about a sign. For someone who he complains about a sign. But he can go around.
He's going to steal someone's pension,
knocking knees. You talk about being a thug.
Well, you know, like I said from the beginning, I mean, he's the Tony Soprano of Pennsylvania. You know, the trash man who hath found his way into a little bit of power, and now he's going to wield his bat and crush anyone else. And look, I got to know how long these cameras were in that hallway, because that's going to tell me an awful lot. And if it was such a huge problem, knocking over my sign, there's got to be someone doing it.
Yeah, and
at least once.
I want to know what would the Capitol Police do? They get down to the bottom of this and they find out who's knocking over the sign. Because I guarantee you, he did not make this for the Capitol Police. He was trying to probably do this for himself to use for a fundraising email.
Of course. He was hoping to look. I mean, really, honestly, truthfully, he was hoping one of the union people would kick it over. And this was, he's trying to entrap them into something. Because sometimes some people do get upset. If you're trying to think about this for a second, imagine that you're a teacher and you've worked 30 years of your life. You're a state worker and you've been out on the roads plowing every winter for 30 years. And you're getting towards that retirement age and you hear all this talk about pensions and they're going to steal your pension. And you've been working your entire freaking life to get to that golden day where you can go, you know what? I retire and I'm going to be able to sit down on my back porch and have a beer and I'm going to be okay. And now they're saying, we're going to take that from you. You're going to get someone upset and someone's going to do something. And that's what they're hoping for. They're doing all of this radical stuff. So one person, and all they want is one, do something stupid so that they can exploit it and paint with the broad brush that it's all of them. They're all bad because someone got upset. And what's interesting to me is I want to know how long that damn camera was there, because I don't think that stuff's happening. I think people are calling their offices and they're complaining. I think when you see them on the street, people are giving them the sign and telling them they're number one, but there's no threats. There's no harassment. There's none of that stuff going on. And the sign kicking over is BS.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it in a nutshell, but they're looking for that one because they want that poster child so that they go, see, we're being intimidated.
Or maybe he can make a sign,
or he can make a
of
sign
the person knocking over the sign and have that out in front of his office for the next couple of days.
And that's the other thing we got to get to the bottom of. We got to find out if he's allowed to have those big, gigantic signs in the middle of the hallway. Because I got to tell you, there have been a couple of rallies there where people have spread out down the hallways. And you know, people talking in the middle of the hallway, and you try to get around, those damn things are in the way. You should kick them off. You should kick them over just to get them out of the way.
Yeah, this
just my thought.
This should be fun.
I mean, I got to be honest. Right now, I'm feeling like I want to go kick them over just to kick them over.
So you could be on video.
No, just because they're dumb. It's stupid. There's part of me that just wants to go kick the signs over because they don't belong there. My hallway, get these damn things out of here.
And just think about that. Taxpayer dollars are going towards someone sitting in an office creating those things on Facebook. On
I don't
Photoshop.
no, I don't think so. I think Wagner actually has a tagline at the bottom that he pays for out of pocket those signs. Because that would be a huge stink. Because that was one of my first questions when I saw one a couple months ago. And because I had asked about that. And he does pay for it. He's rich enough. Wait a second. It is our tax dollars that pays him because of the trash pickup, which I guess you could make an argument that our tax dollars are paying for those damn signs.
You can,
but just in a roundabout way. I don't know. I gotta, so get back to work on that right to know request. Because I want to know. Inquiring minds have to know who was where, when, and I got to be honest. I think the Republicans in the Senate not going to be thrilled about this. Because you got to wonder if they knew. We should call Senator John Eichelberger and see if he knew that he may have been videotaped going in and out of Wagner's office. That would be interesting. See the paranoid against the paranoid. Wow, we're gonna have to look into that. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me here with your thoughts of paranoia and delusion for our good state senators at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit about labor news across the country, what's going on, what's good, what's bad, the whole 9 yards. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Just about due. I'm a massive ass strike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A Walmart worker is suing the company for denying health insurance benefits to spouses of gay employees. The suit seeks national class action status against Walmart. Jackie Coate is the plaintiff. She says Walmart denied health insurance benefits to her spouse, Diana Smithson, and that resulted in $150,000 in medical debt. The suit alleges violation of gender discrimination laws. Coate says Walmart repeatedly denied Coate's request to add Smithson to Coate's Walmart health insurance plan. Smithson was diagnosed with cancer in 2012 and is now in hospice care. Walmart so far has said only that its benefits coverage policy was legal. The Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, GLAAD, filed this lawsuit and says it believes other companies with policies similar to Walmart may also be vulnerable to legal challenges. A Southern California-based supermarket chain has been ordered by the state's labor commissioner to pay over $180,000 in fines for wage theft violations. Next week, El Super grocery store chain will face additional labor violation claims at the federal level. Monica Lopez has more from Los Angeles.
A California state labor investigation found that 20 El Super grocery store employees worked off the clock, were denied full rest periods, and were not compensated for overtime work. On July 20th, the National Labor Relations Board is scheduled to hear additional claims of labor violations, including allegations of wage theft in vacation policy, coercion and intimidation of employees, and what the UFCW is calling the illegal firing of former El Super cashier Fermin Rodriguez. Rodriguez says he was fired from his position after 9 years on the job for speaking out about how he and some of his co-workers were treated by store management. He says, the store manager yelled at me in front of the customers saying I was too slow, but I knew I was doing good work because my customers were happy with the service I gave them. The problem was that the store manager liked to harass the staff working at El Super. United Food and Commercial Workers Local 770 and their supporters are in the midst of a boycott of the store's 49 locations. Last week, supporters rallied at stores in California, Arizona, and Nevada. Monica Lopez, Workers Independent News, Los Angeles.
Workers Independent News is made possible in part through underwriting support from the United Steelworkers and from the OPEIU, the Office of Professional Employees International Union.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, health care, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Well, we're going to start in a couple weeks with our budget adjustment bill. The first step is we're going to deal with collective bargaining for all public employee unions, because you divide and conquer.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So, yes, we're going to use divide and conquer. We'll take on those unions. And, you know, like I said, back in 2011, when we were sleeping in the Capitol there in Wisconsin, all of that insanity, it's going to find its way across the country. It's eventually going to get to Pennsylvania, which is how we ended up with insane Senator Scott Wagner. The guy who's photographing people and digitally photographing people in the hallways because they're going to knock over my sign. It's just sad. And I'm waiting for the Paranoia Caucus to kick up. It's just amazing stuff to me. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world when we're talking about labor news. And we've got Doug Cunningham. He's the news anchor and producer over at Workers Independent News. Doug, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you, brother, for having us on. We really appreciate being able to talk with you and spend time with you. I do consider you a brother, not only because you're in the union, but for what you're doing with labor media.
And I as well back at you. And, I look at what's going on in your state. I know you're from Wisconsin. You guys were gracious enough to let us use some of your facilities back in 2011 when the guy who is now running for president was going after unions, going after workers, and caused the big ruckus that went on there. Now he's running for the big job.
Yeah, and people ought to know one thing that they ought to know for sure, Rick, is that this governor has had not one, but two criminal investigations into his activities, okay? The first one, called the John Doe in Wisconsin, it's the same as a grand jury proceeding, essentially. Right. 6 of his staffers, his former staffers, when he was Milwaukee County executive, convicted of crimes. 6 of them, okay? You can understand maybe one getting into trouble, 6 of them. There was a parallel email system in his county executive office in Milwaukee, a secret one, that they were using to email things out. What they were doing basically was doing partisan work on county time. One of them was convicted of illegal campaign activity for working on a lieutenant governor's campaign. Kelly Reinflash was her name. Tim Russell, another ex-staffer of Walker, convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison for stealing more than $20,000 from a nonprofit group Walker put him in charge of. Another woman formerly working for Walker, found guilty of engaging in campaign work on county time. Another one embezzled more than $51,000 of donations intended for military veterans and their families. Another one convicted of actual money laundering, sentenced to 2 years of probation after admitting he violated campaign finance laws by laundering tens of thousands of dollars. And here's the big deal. Tomorrow, Thursday, the Wisconsin State Supreme Court is scheduled to rule on whether or not to let a second criminal probe into Walker go forward. And this is concerning Walker's recall election in 2012. So this guy's facing criminal probes as he tries to run for president.
And the thing is when if he becomes president, he might be able to but to top what happened during the Reagan years.
Oh, absolutely. He is a fantasy. Ronald Reagan is a fantasy of his. Walker thinks that the ultimate in guts, apparently, is to use state government or federal government power to smash workers in their organization. I mean, there was nothing that reveals the character of Scott Walker more clearly than that fake David Koch billionaire phone call that happened back in 2011 during the height of the protest in Wisconsin, when he thought he was talking to David Koch, and he said to him, David Koch says to him, when we crush these bastards, meaning public workers, teachers and nurses and firefighters, when we crush these bastards, we'll fly you out to Cali, Scott, and show you a good time. The governor of Wisconsin's reaction was not to correct him and say, no, these are not bastards. These are public workers in Wisconsin. How dare you? Instead, he said, oh, that would be outstanding. There was this eagerness in his voice.
I'd be tickled pink, all tingling in the panties. And that same conversation, what I talked about on Monday, is the same kind of thing. The fake Koch brothers said, well, we could send in some troublemakers.
Yeah,
and Scott Walker's response was, well, we had thought about that. And I got to tell you, that sent chills down my spine.
Yeah, he said we thought about that, and the only reason we didn't do that, he thought, is because it wouldn't play well. He thought, that ultimately there'd be some kind of blowback from it. But he didn't reject it out of hand as an immoral act to put firefighters and police officers at risk by creating trouble in a crowd of 100,000 people. And yet he was willing to do that. And his ridiculous comparison about why he's able to be president and take on ISIS is because he took on these 100,000 workers. I was in the middle of that protest, Rick. You were there too. I was up there almost every day, in and outside of the Capitol, when they were occupying inside or protesting outside. I was in the midst of that crowd. That was not a dangerous crowd. That was not a radical crowd.
Yes, it was. Oh, the first woman I met, like a 90-year-old woman who gave me a sweet potato. A deadly sweet. And I got to tell you, I don't like sweet potatoes.
They had this consummate Midwestern politeness there. I mean, when I was walking around there, at one point I was trying to get some food at a restaurant. It was jam-packed with people on State Street in Madison by the Capitol. And I dropped a $10 bill inadvertently, right? I was about ready to walk out of the store. Somebody picked it up and gave it back to me. At one point, I was fumbling with my equipment, dropped a glove in the middle of a really cold winter, started to walk away. Somebody picked the glove up and handed it to me. People were saying, excuse me, as they were walking their way through the crowd. This was the grassroots America, salt of the earth Wisconsinites, teachers, students, police officers, firefighters. And this guy's character is what's at issue here. Not just that he attacked labor unions or worker rights, which is bad enough, but the character of this man and his thought process. He refuses to raise the minimum wage. He did not set that fake billionaire straight during that conversation when he thought no one else was listening with this billionaire supporter of his, and he was utterly contemptible in his character and the comments that he made. And that's the true Scott Walker. That's the real Scott Walker. And that's what people out there in the country ought to know. And I'm waiting eagerly to see what the Supreme Court does here tomorrow.
Yeah, I am
about
too.
letting that criminal probe go forward or not.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. But as I said yesterday, I'm not all that worried about Walker, to be honest, because I think all of that, once you hit that national stage, it's one thing to be the big fish in the little pond. Once you get to that big stage where everyone's looking to knock you off, I think all of this stuff then begins to come out. And I hope it does. I think it has to come out. And we as a country have to have the conversation of, do we want a country where labor unions are illegal? Do we want a country where the Koch brothers get to call a sitting governor and say, hey, you want us to send in some troublemakers? Do we want that kind of a country?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, not only that, but the whole idea that Scott Walker can even govern properly. Wisconsin lost 250,000 jobs when he was elected in 2010. He only has half of that number now. He's failed on that count. He set up an economic development corporation in Wisconsin called WEDC, and that was supposed to loan businesses money so that they could create jobs in Wisconsin. What happened? They didn't review properly all of these loans. So the result is millions of dollars of taxpayer money doled out to businesses. In one case, $500,000, a company whose owner had supported Scott Walker and donated to Scott Walker. And what did they use the money for? Luxury car rentals. Maserati was one of the vehicles. And they did completely lost track of that money, didn't require repayment. Millions of dollars we're talking about.
Yeah, well, you know, it's either a free Maserati ride or a kid's education. What would you rather have? Would you rather have the Maserati ride or some kid getting an education?
So believe me, folks, this is not the kind of guy you want in the White House. This is not the kind of guy you want in a dog catcher's office. This guy, there are suggestions of corruption based on these two criminal probes and various aspects of what he has done in time to Wisconsin. And the message from a lot of progressive folks and labor people in Wisconsin is, don't let him do to the country what he has done so far to Wisconsin.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing. Look, I don't want to see the U.S. become a right-to-work nation, but if he's the nominee, that whole no rights at work agenda is where we will be pushing forward to. And right to work, I think, will be the least of the concerns folks have. I've been saying that these Republicans want to take us back to the days of Lochner, where, you know, if you're desperate enough to work for free in horrible conditions, well, it's up to you, buddy. You got the liberty of contract.
They have zero respect for working people, zero respect for the rights of working people, and they want to systematically dismantle and tear apart any organized working family power in this country so that billionaires will remain unopposed and they can have their way without any resistance whatsoever. This is the guy that's out there running for president. This is the guy who touts his Eagle Scout character and his son of a Baptist preacher, and he missed somehow those segments of the scripture that talk about treating working people and poor people properly under the law. And he could sure use a lesson from Pope Francis on how to deal with workers and labor and what and the dangers of letting money rule the roost.
Excellent point. The other thing that bothers me and that concerns me is his much like George Bush, this anti-intellectualism. I didn't have a college degree, and this whole pushback against any intellectual thought that scares me as well.
Oh, me too. This guy is basically a neo-McCarthyist. Eugene McCarthy. This guy is really not McCarthy. I'm sorry, not that Eugene. This is Senator McCarthy, different one. But he's the red baiting senator, is who I'm referring to in Wisconsin history. This guy is like that. He puts a friendly, aw shucks kind of Midwest average guy face on what really ultimately amounts to fascism, Rick. And so in that respect, he's dangerous. I think you're right about the national spotlight. It's going to be more difficult for him to get away with what he's gotten away with here under the national spotlight. But remember, he has these billionaire backers, the Koch brothers, the Adelson, So
the Koch brothers, the woman that you heard at the beginning of it, Diane Hendricks, that famous tape of, we're going to divide and conquer, and her with the all tingly in the panties. When do we get, right to work?
Oh, and she gave over $1 million to the Republicans in Wisconsin in 2014 alone. $1 million from that woman. So yeah, that's what we're up against here. So people should not underestimate him. At the same time, though, you have to understand that people can take him on and take him on successfully if they know his record. I would urge people to go to One Wisconsin Now website, One Wisconsin Now, the Scott Walker files. They have an enormous archive there on Scott Walker. It's an excellent resource for people who want to really know the truth about what Scott Walker's record has been all about.
And
all
it's
you have to
something
do,
we'll
too,
be
is
spending an
contrast
awful lot of
those.
time on.
Yeah.
Let's move on. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Doug Cunningham. He's the news anchor over at Workers Independent News Service. The news clips you hear at the top of the hour here on The Rick Smith Show. I guess United Airlines, there's something going on there this week?
Yeah, there's a system-wide picket going on at all airlines that are serving United Airlines tomorrow. The Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, is conducting it. They've been trying for 2 years to get a contract with United. United has yet to complete a merger, which makes it one of the richest airlines, certainly in the world. They are reporting record profits, and yet for 2 years, somehow the union there has been unable to get a contract with them. So the flight attendants are going to be out picketing at airports across the country, in Guam and other places, and they are there to say that we want a fair contract from United. They want the flying public to know what's happening with this airline and with their labor contracts. So the Association of Flight Attendants CWA Day of Action is tomorrow. We'll have a report on that with a couple of representatives from AFA CWA in the WIN newscast coming up that I'm working on today. So we want people to pay attention to that because that's emblematic of the struggle of workers everywhere to just try to get a fair deal. All they want is a fair day's pay for a fair day's work and some respect to sit down and actually bargain in good faith, to reach a fair and equitable settlement. That's what labor unions want. That's what the flight attendants want. They'll be out at airports pressing that point tomorrow.
Also, I saw a story recently about this supermarket chain, El Super, which evidently got hit with some wage theft claims.
Yeah, El Super has that. They actually had a fine for wage theft out in the Los Angeles area. We have a reporter out there by the name of Monica Lopez. She does some fine work for us. And we are the UFCW, which is the union representing workers at El Super. They're actually in the midst of a boycott of El Super. And there's going to be more federal action, too, as labor complaints on a federal level get judged by them. So it was a California state labor investigation that found that they were liable for $180,000 in fines for wage theft violations. And, we'll see what happens from here with the boycott and with the federal action coming up in a few days.
I look at this and, we see these wage theft claims all across the country. And, one of the things that I tell people, in the 20 years that I carried a Teamsters union card in my pocket and drove for a union company, never once did I ever get cheated out of a digit, not a dime. Every dime I was owed, I was paid. There was no wage theft going on there. And I think that kind of discussion needs to happen in this country to get people to sign contracts, to join unions, and really to start looking at each other as the solution rather than looking to government all the time for these laws. You take care of it on the shop floor before you legislate.
Absolutely. My parents were both United Auto Worker members in Michigan. They retired from that job. No wage theft there either. My grandfathers were United Mine Workers of America members in Kentucky. Grandmother was a teacher. No wage theft there. They were all union. So that's absolutely critical. And by the way, this rabid anti-unionism is hard to rationalize when you consider that only about 11.5% of workers in this country now are organized. How can 11.5% of the workforce have such enormous, fearful power that the right wing likes to believe that they have that needs to be somehow contained or squashed or suppressed? It's absurd on the face of it. 11% of the workforce. Why are they the target? They're the target because the right-wing enemies of working people know that that's how working people get power. You organize in unions, you can negotiate, you get a fair deal, a better deal. The average union worker makes about $200 a week more in this country than non-union workers, and that is the real deal here in terms of defending working families. If you are organized and have a organized representation, you are much more likely, I should say, to get a good deal at your workplace, and also you will have a voice in politics, in the national policies of this country, and that's what the right wingers like Scott Walker want to destroy. They don't want working people to be organized and have power.
They want to, as Scott Walker said, divide and conquer.
Absolutely right. That's exactly what he wants to do. And he thinks, by the way, his hero Ronald Reagan was just superb for smashing PATCO, the Air Traffic Controllers Union, and he thought that was wonderful. And he compares, labor protesters in Wisconsin to ISIS. Yeah. This is the kind of judgment you want in the White House?
Not me. Absolutely not me. But it comes down to, again, the money. And, in talking about the presidential election, the last story I wanted to get to, we were at the AFT conference on Monday, talking to the Randy Weingarten, the president there, and a whole bunch of other folks. And, the big news, that came out of it was AFT has endorsed Hillary Clinton. I don't know about you, but I've gotten a ton of people, just not thrilled with the fact that AFT came out for Hillary.
Well, I mean, AFT is the first national union to endorse in the 2016 presidential cycle, and they did pick Hillary. Bernie Sanders is out there, though, just exciting the hell out of crowds all over the place. I was on vacation, unfortunately, when he came to Madison. But he came to Madison, 10,000 people. He's getting record big crowds. He and Hillary Clinton and others are going to be meeting with the AFL-CIO later this month to talk about, endorsements from the AFL-CIO. And, the American Federation of Teachers support who they want to support. I respect their decision. But it seems to me that Bernie Sanders, when you just look at the record, going right down the line, Bernie Sanders has really a stronger pro-labor record than Hillary Clinton does. So where's the support for Sanders in terms of the union endorsement?
And that's a lot of the responses that I'm getting from folks, that if labor truly, stood on what they say, that Sanders is the guy. How much of this do you think is, and I think I know, but how much of this is, everyone thinks Hillary's going to win?
Well, that's the calculation, but it's a self-fulfilling and self-defeating prophecy. You say to yourself, well, if we don't get fully behind a candidate, they're not going to be able to be elected. Well, of course they won't be able to be elected if you don't get fully behind them and support them, right? They need support, especially early on. So it's a self-defeating philosophy, I think. I think we got to start in the labor movement. We got to start saying what Rich Trumka has actually publicly said not too long ago, that it doesn't matter what initial is behind your name or who you are. We're going to judge you on your pro-labor record. Well, if that's the criteria, then Bernie Sanders stands head and shoulders above anybody else in the race at this point.
And I got to tell you, I wish we could get back to a time where, where Republicans were like the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower, who once said, anyone who would come out against labor unions or Social Security or unemployment, they'd never be heard from again. Their numbers are negligible and they are stupid. And the sad reality is stupid seems to be running one of the major parties in this country and about half of the other one.
Well, yeah, and there was probably the best Republican president to ever exist, Abraham Lincoln, who had some very strong pro-labor comments that he made as well. And it gets to a point, Rick, where this modern obsession that right-wing Republicans have with attacking labor doesn't always have to forever be the case. Okay, I mean, even the Republican Party can have an epiphany at some point and say, "Wait a minute, we've been wrong about this. Let's support working people, and America would be better off."
Look at the big blue X.
There you go. Yeah.
Perfect example. Doug, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks for filling us in on the news. I look forward to talking to you again.
Great being with you, Rick. Thank you.
Great talking to you. Doug Cunningham, news anchor, producer over at Workers Independent News. The clips you hear at the beginning of every hour. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Firefighters, my friend, and the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, and we are going all the way back to the year 1381. That was the day John Ball, the leader of the Peasants' Revolt in England, was executed. Due to the plague, the Black Death, in 1348, many peasants had died. Land was plentiful and laborers were scarce. The authorities responded with emergency legislation, the Ordinance of Laborers in 1349 and the Statute of Laborers in 1351. These laws fixed wages at pre-plague levels and punished employers trying to outbid their competitors. Local lords had the right to prevent serfs from leaving their manors. To raise money for the ongoing 100 Years' War with France, Parliament levied a new tax on every person over the age of 14. This was especially unpopular among the peasant class. The church sided with the wealthy landowners. As a result, some priests rebelled against the church's hierarchy. John Ball was one of these rebels, and for his rebellion, he was imprisoned at Maidstone Castle. The initial outbreak of the Peasants' Revolt occurred in 1380. The people rose up against the new tax. One tax collector was beaten and driven from the village of Fawbit. The chief justice, sent to calm the peasants, suffered a similar fate. Word spread, and uprisings occurred throughout England. Rebels in Kent besieged Maidstone Castle and freed John Ball. Troops were dispatched around the country to suppress the revolt. John Ball was hung, drawn and quartered in the marketplace, as an example to any other potential rebels. The peasants' revolt was crushed, but Parliament gave up trying to control peasant wages and stopped collecting the poll tax. Many peasants were now considered free men, no longer owned by landowners. All of these things helped to end the feudal system.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the history of the flag of the Confederate States of America and the arguments about it still alive today. William Miles had been appointed to chair a flag committee that would propose the first Confederate flag. Miles had already designed one before his committee ever assembled, but it quickly became apparent the people wanted something more like the Stars and Stripes of the Union, which his was not. So the Confederate Stars and Bars was chosen as the first Confederate flag. But the flag that Chairman Miles had designed didn't go by the wayside, and eventually would become the flag that caught on during the war and after it was finished. It's Mr. Miles' flag with the blue stripes forming an X with stars inside the stripes, all on a red background, that we see and fight about today. Join us again for more flags. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Real quick, in talking with Doug Cunningham, brought up a whole bunch of thoughts about being back in Wisconsin, and the fact that Scott Walker wants to be president. I found it very interesting that The Onion had a very a funny profile of Scott Walker, where they said his birthplace was a Tea Party comment thread. They said his general strength possesses image and political credentials necessary to appeal to both Koch brothers. His personal beliefs reasonably well concealed. His views on labor unions. He's a longtime member of local elected officials 438. His personal hero is a sixth grade teacher who inspired him to strip educators of collective bargaining rights and dismantle publicly funded higher education. His greatest accomplishment is he stood up to people who make a living pulling others from burning buildings. His house band is the Walkettes. And his gubernatorial record, first governor in history to raise enough out-of-state funds to overcome recall challenge from his own constituents. I think that's fairly accurate. Also, his chief political rival, anyone who wants to make a living wage. I think that's right about smack on. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
In 1897, miners at collieries throughout northeastern Pennsylvania's anthracite coal region had enough. Conditions were grueling and life was difficult. Miners were frequently cheated out of pay, overcharged for supplies, some they never wanted or received, forced to live in captive company-owned towns, shop at overpriced company-owned stores, even mandated to use the company doctor since fees were deducted automatically from the miners' pay. This, combined with mine owners forcing longer unpaid hours and the Anti-Immigrant Campbell Act of 1897, taxing mine owners for the use of non-native labor, drove miners to strike. Spontaneously starting in Pennsylvania's Lehigh Valley, workers marched north to get other miners to join in the struggle. Their demands were modest: a 10-cent pay raise and a reduction in the cost of gunpowder. They also wanted the freedom to shop in non-company-owned stores of their choosing and see a doctor not owned by the coal company. As the miners moved northward toward Hazleton, mine owners determined to crush the workers' protest sent their company-paid police force and strikebreakers. Local law enforcement was also on the side of mine owners. Luzerne County Sheriff James Martin, a former mine foreman, deputized 102 local men, arming them with Winchester rifles and sidearms. The group of some 400 miners marching peacefully and unarmed in rows of fours moved onward toward Latimer. Stephen Urich, joining the group outside of Hazleton, taking with him the American flag, shouted, "We have nothing to worry about because we have the American flag to protect us." Within hours and a hail of Winchester bullets, Stephen Urich was gunned down in cold blood, his beloved American flag drenched in his blood and the blood of those who lay murdered and wounded. Eyewitnesses said the sheriff and his hired killers mowed the men down like grass. More than 20 men were murdered on that September day, and more than 50 were wounded, many shot in the back in Labor's forgotten massacre. The sheriff and his murderous band were tried for their part in the Latimer massacre and found not guilty of murdering 20 unarmed peaceful demonstrators. Lest we never forget, or as the wife of a miner whose life was stolen from him told her children, "You can forgive, but you can't forget." This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen! The animals, trap, trap, trap till the cages fall. The cages fall, stay awake in the dark, count mistakes. The light was out.
Sanity for a change. It's the Rick Smith Show.
The day is new, and everyone is waiting on you. And you got time.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Big fan of the series, the Netflix series, Orange is the New Black. Third season came out, I think the 12th of June it was. And of course, we in the Smith household then binge watched the entire season over the next couple of weeks. One of the themes in it, and I think I've talked about this in the past, one of the themes that popped up was a unionization effort in the prison where this series is taking place, and all of the things that happen as the prison is privatized and the treatment of workers. And it just, to me, it was really, it was art imitating life. But I saw this article written by Leslie Tolf, and she is the president of the Union Plus, the great folks who give union benefits and compile all that stuff for union members. She wrote a great article over at Huffington Post, and I said, we got to get her on to come talk a little bit about this, which is why I've asked Leslie on the program. Leslie, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you. I love to talk about Orange is the New Black or any progressive TV shows, which there aren't many in the world. The one thing that I was thinking about as I was watching this huge union theme was, when was the last time I heard about unionism on a TV show? And the only thing I could come up with for those Simpson fans was the 1993 episode of The Simpsons when, they go on strike. And it's just, it's not a theme anymore, which is sad commentary.
Which is a huge difference from when I was a kid, because when I was a kid, growing up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, you saw in the media a lot that the way to the middle class, the way to a better life, was the union job. You saw it both in your personal life and also in the media. Now we're talking the 1970s, a different time. But back then we saw these frames often.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's kind of a race to the bottom, right? The conversation has changed from how do I get what the union worker is getting to the union worker shouldn't be getting that, right? It's an amazing evolution over the last 30 years. But I thought that Orange is the New Black did a great job of really talking about prisons. I mean, most of us don't know anything about it, right? But 65% of private prison contracts require occupancy quotas to guarantee, profits for, pretty much privatizers. And the whole notion of the women doing the whispers undergarments is actually not myth. Prisoners were put to work in the 90s sewing underwear for Victoria's Secret.
And still are. I mean, there's this Unicorn company who's out there, pimping the idea that we can get low-cost, in-sourced labor in prisons. And we've talked about it here on the program. To me, all of this privatization, and that's why I was glad to see that season 3 went in that direction, talking about privatization, talking about exploited workforces, talking about the exploited guards who were then put off in, just one day they found out we're no longer members of the union.
Oh, exactly. And, one of the facts that we all know that our sisters and brothers who aren't in unions don't know is that employers illegally fire people for their support of a union, right? So again, in Orange is the New Black, you see this happening when Flacca and her friends successfully force Piper to give them real pay. Piper fires Flacca in retribution.
Yeah.
So it's just a much more graceful way of explaining what is a fact in the real world.
And I think everyone, season 3 especially, because to me the theme of all of the privatization, all the things we've been talking about, is all right there. And I think it's one of those eye-opening moments for folks, because I think in this country, one, our education system has failed us because it doesn't teach labor education. It doesn't teach what 100 years ago was the reality of high school kids or 8th graders. I think we've lost and forgotten what it took to get to the place that we're in now.
Yeah, I agree. And but the problem is that we have to meet people where they are, right? Millennials, when we look at, some of the work that we're doing at the AFL-CIO around alternative models of representation, looking at worker centers, looking at the Fight for 15, looking at, what young workers' needs are, who stay on average 18 months in a job.
Right.
How difficult is it to really organize in those kinds of conditions? Or lastly, the most, the one of the fascinating things coming up now is the shared economy, right? You got Uber out there, you got TaskRabbit. So this is not an easy scene for us traditional unionists to be attacking.
But I think you hit in your article and in your piece, which I highly suggest people take a look at. And we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. It's titled Union is the New Black. And I highly suggest it. But the one theme that you hit on that I think really more important than everything else is that idea of solidarity. This idea of pulling people together instead of being divided and continually pitted against one another. I think as, like my grandparents' generation, they were a community. They may not have liked each other, but they came together to fight fascism. They came together to fight for a middle class. I think we need to be thinking in those terms again.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And that's something, it doesn't matter whether you're working at McDonald's or a prison or Boeing, that concept of community. Because what, the corporate bosses are trying to do is separate us, right? This notion of them requiring employees to go to, corporate management meetings where they basically can tell you whatever they want to tell you. You might remember in Orange is the New Black, Joe Caputo, who kind of turns from good guy to bad guy, forces everybody to go into these closed-door intimidating meetings with union-busting supervisors. So the important thing is that, people can, build a sense of community and feel that courage, and it can happen. One can organize.
Did you see Caputo? Did you see him flipping? Because I got to tell you, as soon as they pushed him out in the front, I go, he's only going to stab you in the back. It's going to happen. You know he's going to be the rat, the guy who's going to go running the management and undo everything. At least I did. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did, and of course, we're all waiting, for the drama to play out, next season. I hope, I feel like I should be getting together with the Writers Guild writers and saying, hey, let's make a happy ending out of this. Let's, create some more wins, even if they're fictional.
And that's the thing. I mean, the sad reality is the wins we're going to have are going to be fictional for a while until I think we come together and begin fighting collectively across race barriers, across gender barriers, across ethnicities, all of that stuff. We've got to figure out how we're going to match not just the wealth and the power of the boss class, but also their divisive tactics.
Yeah. And, I'm in an odd situation. I do member benefits for the AFL-CIO and other unions. And so my take is an odd one, but, we are trying to work on benefits because the social contract is being eliminated, right?
Absolutely.
There's no more pensions. There will be no more health care. And those were really the solidifying threads in which the union was able to, create this community of solidarity. So with the absence of that, what is going to take the place of that? One of the things we're working on is our own version of a union healthcare exchange. Because we can't just kind of stick our necks in the sand saying, oh, it'll be better someday. The world is changing, and we're going to have to create benefits and products that change with it.
Well, I mean, the reality is that this isn't new. I mean, you go back and you learn labor's history, Leslie, and the reality is the miners, the mine workers, they set up their own hospitals. They had their own clinics.
Mm-hmm.
Unions have been doing the things that their members want for generations. It's a matter, I think, of getting back to some of those things, being community-centric and pulling people back together.
Right. And I think one thing that the unions are doing well is reaching out to other progressive communities. And this is just another theme of what you were talking about with solidarity and community. We need to make sure that we're shoring up our issues with church groups, with parent groups, with political groups. Unfortunately, we do not have the numbers anymore to stand alone. We have to stand in concert. So if you look at even the strike that went on in Chicago with the teachers, it was kind of old-time unionism, but it was effective because the teachers union got the parents involved, they got the community involved, they got the churches involved, and they spoke to a common problem.
No, absolutely. I think that's important. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Leslie Tolf. She's the president of Union Plus. They've got their website, unionplus.org, I believe, correct?
That's correct, unionplus.org.
For union members who want to check out the benefits they offer there. She's also written a great piece, Union is the New Black. One of the things that and you can get that at the ricksmithshow.com. Just click on Leslie's name. One of the things that I wanted to bring up is, to kind of highlight what you were talking about there. I have an aunt who's never been a union member. In fact, I got a couple of family members who are very staunch supporters of labor unions. They'll never be union members. They've doctors, lawyers, they're never going to be that stuff. But they highly support it because they understand that it's good for society and it's good for community. It's good for workers. I think we have to reach out to those folks as well and understand people who may never find themselves in unions and to understand that it's a benefit of we the people.
Right. And the other exciting thing, and you know all about this, is that we have set up an associate membership organization called Working America. If you join it, you can get all the benefits of Union Plus. It keeps you current with issues that are important to working people. So nobody has to go without a union. And so, that's probably one of the key successes that we've had over the years. There are 3 million Working America members now across the country, and they help us in political battles, local by local, state by state.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. And you guys do an awful lot of good stuff there. I used to have a credit card from you guys for years and years. And I think you guys do fantastic work.
Well, thanks. And I the one thing I do want to say, and obviously this is not a sales pitch, but the one thing that we do need to do is we all have choices, right? We all have choices not to walk into Walmart, not to buy, goods from Indonesia. what we do need to do is make sure that we're supporting our union brothers and sisters. And so I was amazed to find out that AT&T is the largest union private company in the country. And, you know, 30% of our members have got an AT&T account. They can go to Union Plus today and get a 15% savings on that. So that's just another kind of solidarity. How do we get 1 million people signed up to a union company and not an anti-union company?
Yeah, and also supporting other workers and services that support workers as well. Because I was at your site here a second ago, and you've got legal services and auto plans and travel and entertainment stuff. There's all kind of things for folks to partake in and to help working people here, which kind of takes us back to the story of the Orange is the New Black, that kind of solidarity that you saw in the prison, especially amongst some of the prisoners and some of the prison guards.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, there are things that you can do that support the labor movement. I mean, silly things like going to Disney, right? Disney has more than 7 unionized divisions within their huge industrial complex of union workers. And Union Plus has discounts there. So again, just as a consumer, forget being an activist, but as a consumer, being, making the right choices.
But isn't that part of the whole thing? I mean, at some point, that concept of solidarity, that concept of community, that we're going to support each other and not just, pat each other on the back, but also support each other in what we do for a living?
Yes. And I think, many of us baby boomers, and I assume you and I are in that category, really need to reach down and help our millennial brothers and sisters to take on leadership opportuniunities and not stand in the way.
I'm with you. So what are we expecting for season 4? Because I got to tell you, I've already seen all of season 3. We got any predictions for season 4? Because I'm already chomping at the bit.
Good question. Let's see. Caputo becomes gay? I don't know.
Nothing. I already guessed that anyway. That wouldn't be a huge leap of faith there.
Right. Well, let's get back together after season 4, and we'll do a recap.
Fantastic.
See who was the better.
And I absolutely look forward to it. My prediction is they get a union. Everything's wonderful. They get pay increases and all of that stuff, and then the private company shuts it down. Because that sounds
art, like reality, Rick.
And that's it. That's art imitating life.
Right. We don't want that.
I'm with you. There you go.
All right. Well,
Leslie,
thanks for the time.
I appreciate you taking time for us.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Leslie Toff. Again, if you want to take a look at the article, we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Think of all the roads. Think of all their crossings. Taking steps is easy. Standing still is hard. Remember all their faces. Remember all their voices. Everything is different the second time around.
Your standard governor, Congress critter, and other elected officials routinely insist that they represent the people. But when it comes to making public policy, do they actually represent you or Mr. Money, who writes big campaign checks? Right. Any pretension that we live in a self-governing democratic republic is gone. It's been snuffed out by a tiny club of big money donors, only about 600 people out of our population of 330 million. They've empowered themselves to choose candidates, control the public debate, and bend public policy to their selfish interests. Both major political parties are complicit in this kleptocratic transformation, Republicans by aggressively pushing it, and Democrats by passively acquiescing to it. While Barack Obama has done nothing to stop this money perversion of democracy, he's at least made noise about making the thieves disclose their theft. But noise is not action, and the GOP's enablers of the thievery have even moved to kill Obama's modest disclosure ideas. In June, for example, House Republicans quietly voted to prohibit the SEC, the shareholders' watchdog, from requiring CEOs to tell the corporate owners how much of their money is being spent on particular political candidates. Another GOP backroom proviso would keep the IRS from disclosing the names of corporate tax law manipulators that use so-called social welfare groups to funnel money anonymously into partisan political campaigns. Also, a third Republican hide-and-seek provision would allow corporations that get billions of dollars in taxpayer funds to avoid telling us the names of lawmakers they're showering with campaign cash. This is Jim Hightower saying the torrent of secret corporate money in our elections is hosing our democratic ideals and possibilities, blasting the people out of the process, and imposing big money governance over America.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service.
Had we been willing to settle for a lesser deal, we would have finished the negotiation a long time ago. But we were not. All of us, not just the United States, but France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Russia, China, and the EU, were determined to get this right. And so we have been patient, and I believe our persistence has paid off.
That was Secretary of State John Kerry this morning announcing a nuclear deal with Iran that's been 23 months in the making. Per the terms of that deal, Iran's nuclear enrichment activity will be capped for 10 years, while inspectors with the International Atomic Energy Agency are slated to remain in the country in some capacity for a quarter century. Right at the center of the deal is the UN Security Council, which will likely endorse the nuclear agreement later this month. Once inspectors deem Iran to be in compliance with nuclear-related elements of the deal, the UN Security Council will peel back all of its Iranian sanctions at the same time. Among the sanctions to be removed, controversially, is an arms embargo, which apparently will remain in place for 5 years, despite no mention of that in today's circulated text. Kerry made it clear that the U.S. didn't support such a move, but that negotiations sometimes require compromise.
There were 7 participants in this negotiation. 3 of them believe there should be no embargo whatsoever, and 4 of them believe there should be a continuation. To have achieved that when 3 of the nations could have said no deal and walked away, or you could have had a different outcome, I think is significant.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Just when you thought it was safe, those crazy Republicans are at it again. It's time for the Rick Smith Show's Conservative Alerts.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So put this under the heading of, if it's on the internet, it's got to be true. If I saw it on the web, it's absolute, it's God speak. It's right there. It's the truth. And then put it into the same category that if Obama says it, if Obama can do it, we can all do it. The right wing loves to say how Obama's just printing money. He's just printing it, spending us into oblivion, and that we can print our own money. Evidently, that's what Pamela Downs thought, the 45-year-old Kingsport, Tennessee woman who was arrested on Sunday because she went into the gas station to pay for her gas with $5 bills that the guy behind the counter thought may be not actual legal tender. Evidently, she decided on her printer that she would print off pictures of $5 bills and then take, school glue like little kids have, like an art project, and just put them together and, have a $5 front and back bill that was glued together. Now, the woman explained to the cop that, she received the fake money at a different gas station. At least that's what she said. And, never really looked at it. They searched her purse, found a $100 bill
printed in black and white, of course, with the glue upside down. Police had also found a number of receipts in her purse that she had purchased a printer and copier at the local Walmart. Now, what's interesting about this is not new. She is not Magellan. She's only the latest dupe to figure out how to get caught. And, I don't know if I should feel sorry for her, mock her. I don't really know, because I do. I feel sorry for stupid. This is, people who have no critical thinking skills, who are just sheep who walk to the slaughter. Do you feel sorry for them? Do you have empathy? Do you sympathize with the stupidity? I don't know. Evidently, they went and they searched her apartment, and they found printing supplies, copier paper, scissors, glue, and a printer, and about $30,000 to $50,000 worth of fake bills. And I gotta wonder, if you're gonna at least try and do the counterfeiting thing, at least attempt to do it in color. I mean, the first part. The second part, don't use glue to put it together. The printers do come with the ability to print front and back at the same time if you know how to use your printer. But it made me think about a guy I knew back, I guess early 90s, I guess late 80s, early 90s, who had gotten himself into trouble doing kind of the same thing. He would photocopy the dollar bills, and he would photocopy fives, and he would take them and he would go to the change machines, because the early generations of change machines, they were just reading what was being printed. They weren't, whatever the paper was, they weren't texturizing. They weren't checking any of that. So he would go to the airport or to one of these vending machines, and he would just empty the change. He finally got caught, well down the road, as I remember, because the bank that he kept going to with thousands and thousands of dollars worth of quarters, they finally asked why he was doing this and where he was getting it from. He said, I get it from the machine at the airport. Not thinking that someone would go, gee, I wonder what's going on with the machine at the airport. They found out that he was basically emptying the machine of quarters and printing these $5 bills. So this isn't new. She's just the latest in dumb to get caught. And I guess I don't feel sorry for her. I really don't. Also, another dupe that you can look at and you go, well, what do you expect? Another one of these folks, and we hear these stories quite often. South Carolina woman on Sunday, and it must be something about Sundays. She was arrested and thrown in jail Sunday night after she went to a local restaurant, spent several hours running up a tab, harassing the other patrons. And when the restaurateur said, leave, out, pay your bill and go, she said, no, Jesus will pay my tab. And they're like, what? Now, this isn't the first Jesus person who's going to say that Jesus is going to pay the tab. Happened, I think end of last year in Oklahoma, where a woman had run up a huge bar tab and then said her husband Jesus would come back and pay the bill, and she couldn't produce a marriage license or anything, so she ended up going to jail. I look at this and I go, should they go to jail? Because both of them were charged with defrauding the restaurant. And I'm going, I don't know, is that fraud? I got to think there's some kind of mental illness there. I mean, just my thought. If you really honestly think that Jesus is coming to pick up the tab, not so sure. Now put the finger in the water to turn to wine. Got that. If you bring him some loaves and fishes and maybe he multiplies it, I get that. I don't know that Jesus is reaching into his pocket, pulling out a wad of cash. I could be wrong. But I don't think so. Just my thought. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. If you think Jesus is picking up your tab, I'd love to hear it. And if he did, I would love to hear that as well. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also, if you're interested in the camera gate, I wonder if the cameras are still up and running. We can probably go over and make funny faces. Maybe do some charades, put on a play. There's part of me that thinks we should be using these cameras for at least some entertainment value. Or maybe this. since John Eichelberger thinks everyone's telling him he's number one using the second finger, not the first one, maybe you could go by and tell Scott Wagner he's number one. Just kind of a thought. And maybe maybe call his office and say, I don't think I like the cameras. And maybe do it in a tone that's not as nice and pleasant. But also make sure you start off with, I am not attempting to intimidate or harass you. Oh, the fun. And, I look at this and I always think back to The Sopranos. Dr. Melfi in The Sopranos said, with today's pharmacology, no one needs to be unhappy. I also believe no one needs to be delusional. Maybe our good senators could use maybe just a bit of what our pharmacological prowess can offer them. Just a thought. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A Walmart worker is suing the company for denying health insurance benefits to spouses of gay employees. The suit seeks national class action status against Walmart. Jackie Coate is the plaintiff. She says Walmart denied health insurance benefits to her spouse, Diana Smithson, and that resulted in $150,000 in medical debt. The suit alleges violation of gender discrimination laws. Coate says Walmart repeatedly denied Coate's request to add Smithson to Coate's Walmart health insurance plan. Smithson was diagnosed with cancer in 2012 and is now in hospice care. Walmart so far has said only that its benefits coverage policy was legal. The Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, GLAAD, filed this lawsuit and says it believes other companies with policies similar to Walmart may also be vulnerable to legal challenges. A Southern California-based supermarket chain has been ordered by the state's labor commissioner to pay over $180,000 in fines for wage theft violations. Next week, El Super grocery store chain will face additional labor violation claims at the federal level. Monica Lopez has more from Los Angeles.
A California state labor investigation found that 20 El Super grocery store employees worked off the clock, were denied full rest periods, and were not compensated for overtime work. On July 20th, the National Labor Relations Board is scheduled to hear additional claims of labor violations, including allegations of wage theft in vacation policy, coercion and intimidation of employees, and what the UFCW is calling the illegal firing of former El Super cashier Fermin Rodriguez. Rodriguez says he was fired from his position after 9 years on the job for speaking out about how he and some of his co-workers were treated by store management. He says, the store manager yelled at me in front of the customers saying I was too slow, but I knew I was doing good work because my customers were happy with the service I gave them. The problem was that the store manager liked to harass the staff working at El Super. United Food and Commercial Workers Local 770 and their supporters are in the midst of a boycott of the store's 49 locations. Last week, supporters rallied at stores in California, Arizona, and Nevada. Monica Lopez, Workers Independent News, Los Angeles.
Workers Independent News is made possible in part through underwriting support from the United Steelworkers and from the OPEIU, the Office of Professional Employees International Union.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, healthcare, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So the Center, you may remember this last year, the Center for Media and Democracy They came out with a report that said over the past, I guess it's the past decade, the federal government has spent more than $3.3 billion with a B, yes, that's 9 zeros, on these charter schools. Also, the Center for Popular Democracy pointed out that in their study, and they're looking at charter schools, about a third of them in the country experienced waste, fraud, and abuse over $100 million. What they pointed out, just in this year alone, you're going to see the loss of $1.4 billion because charter schools and the waste, fraud, and abuse that we're seeing in some of those folks. And it's one of those things, again, we could spend that money, I think, a little bit better. And this election, I think when we talk about what's going on with the Republican side of it, charter schools have got to be a big portion of that. And I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk to someone here at AFT about the charter school movement, which was why I have asked Todd Reynolds. He is the political coordinator for AFT Maryland to sit down with us. Todd, thanks for sitting down with us.
Hi, Rick. Yeah, thanks.
So, I just threw out a couple of numbers.
Sure.
These two organizations have come out and said there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in these charter schools.
Yeah. And I probably would agree with you. There is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the charter schools. The Center for Popular Democracy study is an interesting one, especially given what we've been dealing with in Maryland. This last year, Maryland elected a Republican governor.
Oh, did you?
And which was a surprise to most people in the state, and probably a surprise to him as well. During the entire campaign, one of the things that came up, one of the things that did not come up was education policy. And
how could it not?
We were worried about that as well. We brought that up. We brought that up with every one of our members. Like, you should be freaking out that none of the candidates. I mean, you had the lieutenant governor, the standing lieutenant governor, Anthony Brown, running against Larry Hogan, who won. And Brown, for his credit, did bring up some things on pre-K education, early childhood education, making it universal. Hogan, the man who won, did not have anything up on any literature, anything up on his website, nothing, no commercials, nothing in the debates that mentioned anything on education, what his policies were going to be if he were elected governor of education.
That's kind of weird to me because, where we're from in Pennsylvania, it was the issue.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was the center issue. It was the whole reason we've got, in my view, one of the more progressive governors in the country.
Sure. I helped out on the Wolf campaign a little bit as well in Pittsburgh as well. Was what was happening in Pennsylvania.
How does that not bleed across the border? We're neighbors.
Yeah, I live in Baltimore, maybe about 40 minutes from the border. And I think a lot of people had what Hogan's people had done during the campaign was make the issue about the outgoing governor, Martin O'Malley, and taxes.
Right.
And if you could, what he did was he focused the campaign completely on that issue. And the lieutenant governor was seen as essentially the incumbent, and a continuation of taxation that a lot of people in Maryland were not happy with for whatever reason. But when he gets elected into office, when Hogan got elected into office, he really, I think, started looking for, all right, I'm speaking like I was Governor Hogan at this point. I don't have a real education policy whatsoever. I need to have one if I ever want to get reelected. And so he starts asking.
Let's get a crazy one.
Well, but he starts asking probably some conservative people nationwide. I mean, he probably had Chris Christie come in and people from different parts of the nation come in.
The Broad Foundation.
And tell him what you need to do educationally. And they turn to him, and I don't know that this has happened, but this is what I'm speculating at this point. Basically said, Maryland has the worst, according to them, charter school law in the country. Now,
worse how? Worse as you don't have a lot of charter schools. Worse as you can't profit from them. Worse how?
All of that. Their view of worse is saying you have too much oversight. You do not allow for more and more charters to open. It's hard. It's difficult, according to that line of their line of argument, for charters to open in the state. Now, that's not true. Maryland has about 43 charters in the state, and 31 of them are in Baltimore City alone. So the vast majority are in Baltimore City. And there are, I think, 3 new charters opening up next year. So it's that narrative that they use is patently false. But
they
that's-
want to turn it into the Wild West.
Oh, yeah.
They want to do what Philadelphia's done.
they exactly
or
that's the point.
Milwaukee or Cleveland
or
any of those other-
Ohio or what's going on in Missouri or what's going on in Illinois with all of this, what we've been seeing in terms of waste, fraud, and abuse at the Center for Popular Democracy Study. I point out that the Center for Popular Democracy came to testify on Hogan's bill in Annapolis and point out that there has been no evidence of waste, fraud, and abuse in Maryland under the charter school law that existed until Hogan came in.
So hold on, how's that possible? Because at the beginning, I was actually kind of an advocate for charter schools.
Okay,
I like the idea of having, magnet. They used to call them magnet schools when I was younger.
Sure.
I like the idea of trying different things, little laboratories of innovation. That seemed okay to me.
Right.
It was a good idea.
Yeah.
My problem is all the profitization,
Right.
all of the curriculum that's owned by corporate special interests, and all of this. I think that's where a lot of people have some problem with.
What we have in Maryland is a strong, from our perspective, a strong charter school law because it allows for local strong oversight from the local school board. So, for example, the 31 charter schools that are in Baltimore City are overseen by the same school board that sees all the other public schools.
Okay.
And has to
That's a
look-
huge difference
Oh
from
my
us.
gosh. Oh my gosh. There's one authorizer, whereas in Pennsylvania, I think you have so many authorizers it's hard to keep count. You know,
Any college can do it.
you can have colleges. Some places have like hospitals.
Yeah.
Some places have, like
It's insane.
churches. And so anyone can authorize in those states a charter school, and that just opens up for tons of abuse and tons of fraud.
You mean like a senator putting his entire family on his?
Oh my God, yeah.
His father's named charter school.
Oh my God, yeah. And
Yeah,
and in those charter schools, one of the things that Hogan's bill had wanted was the charter school teachers would no longer need to be state certified teachers.
And why would we want that?
And-
we can just put people off assembly line.
Oh, or assembly line, or people, hey, my cousin needs a job. He can teach eighth
Patronage
grade
jobs, even better.
Teach eighth grade physics. Even though he has no education background, didn't go to school, didn't take a test to be certified as a teacher, has no classroom experience. He can come in and teach as well as any certified state teacher, according to that line of thought. Ridiculous, but that's what their line of argument has been. So Hogan comes in, and in order to try to get his education chops, show that he cares about education, because one can make the argument that you don't have an education policy, Governor. So he comes in with this whole plan to redo charter schools, make it look like other states. Now, we mounted a pretty strong campaign. One of the things that was pointed out in Baltimore Sun and Washington Post, and Washington Post is so strong in the pockets of charter schools, it's ridiculous.
A lot of money.
Yeah, well, and I think they, I don't know about their current ownership, but the previous ownership, they owned a lot of and operated a lot of online charter schools, and they
So
try to
no
say,
conflict of interest there.
and they try to say in their op-eds or their editorials that Baltimore and Maryland should have a charter school system very close to what DC has. Now, DC, I think just a month or two before the bill was introduced, you had a really famous story of, I think it was Dorothy Haight Public Charter School being investigated for corruption. We don't have that. We don't have those instances of corruption that you see in other states.
She was being investigated for corruption. We actually had the Frontier Virtual Cyber Charter
Yeah.
School. It was a cyber charter school that took 52 kids, told them we were going to give them computers, they were going to get internet access, they're going to be doing all this stuff.
Mhm.
The kids got none
Nothing.
of it. They got all the money, they did none of it.
Does that
The other
surprise
one,
anyone?
No, it doesn't surprise anyone. Another one of my other favorite ones out of Philly is during the daytime, it operated as a charter school. At nighttime, it was a disco. So you were literally
Well, I mean, if
using
you
the
wanna-
classrooms for drunken disorder.
I guess it makes prom easy. I guess you want to look at it that way. But
So look at you on the bright side of that.
But so we wound up, fighting that in terms of, I think 98% of the charter school teachers. Now, one thing that Maryland law currently has, and one of the strengths of Maryland charter school law, is that those teachers that teach in charter school are part of the Baltimore Teachers Union. They're covered under the same collective bargaining agreement. They get all the rights and benefits that every teacher throughout the public school system in the city gets, which is a really big positive thing.
Which is huge. Which is
And-
what I think it should be everywhere.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
of
at the
course.
end of this, and a lot of people say, "Well, the unions are against it." I go, "Wait a second. The unions came up with the idea."
Oh yeah, it was Al Shanker
Albert
was
Shanker, sure.
was instrumental in this. But the teachers at the charter schools, we were pointing out that, and the charter schools operators knew this too. This was a union busting bill. This would have been a bill that got those charter school teachers out from the protections of the collective bargaining agreement. The charter school operators were arguing like, well, it's not anti-union. You guys can form your own little charter union that's particular to that charter school.
And
But
have
you
no power. You'll be weak and off by yourself.
and Philadelphia is a really good example of this. They have a similar sort of law where you can have a union at charter school X, but not part of the Philadelphia Teachers Union. I think there might be like 90 charter schools in Philadelphia. 3 of them have a union,
Yeah.
and it's not for lack of trying. It's
No, they've been
because
trying.
it's because when you take away your collective bargaining rights, as you know this all throughout labor, management doesn't necessarily have to fire you for organizing a union, but they can find a myriad of ways to fire you. You were late by 2 minutes. We don't think you're a team player. You're out. That sort of thing.
We just don't like the color of your shoes
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
As long
Or-
as they don't say you're a woman or you're old or
Or,
go with
yeah.
race, color, creed, or any of that stuff, fine.
You're not a team player,
Yep.
or we're going a different direction.
That's
We don't need a science teacher anymore. Stuff like that. So 98% of the charter school teachers in Baltimore City signed a petition against this bill, which is huge. And that shocked the legislature. It's shocked the press. It shocked the governor. We had turnout in Annapolis. Annapolis has a 90-day. Maryland has a 90-day legislative session where they go over these bills. We were in Annapolis, I think, 15 or 20 times, with each time about 20 buses. Just to say, like, hey, our charter school law is strong. Let's look at ways of strengthening it as opposed to watering it down, having the Wild West, which is what you pointed out earlier, where we have multiple authorizers and no rules, just essentially funneling public education dollars to the elite so they can have, like,
we don't want to be Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So we successfully fought that off. I think the governor probably won't introduce a bill next year. There's going to be a study in Annapolis to look at funding. A lot of charters said they want to have more equitable funding. I think they were arguing that.
So hold on, they want to get more equitable funding. They don't get more funding than the public schools.
They argue that they don't get enough.
Okay. Well, I'm okay with that, because
they-
if you're arguing they don't get enough, then the public schools should get more. In Pennsylvania, they've actually passed a law that the charter schools get last year's funding levels,
Mhm.
which during the Corbett years were constantly cut.
Mhm.
So the charter schools were making out like bandits,
Right.
while the public schools being gutted.
So we'd have to. I think I don't want to take the charter school operators' word for it. So there's going to be studies that are going to be done in the next 2 years to look at funding levels for public schools, because basically what the governor introduced voucher bills to basically take money away from public schools and give it to private schools. Baltimore City public schools need all the funding they can get. We cannot afford funding cuts. And which is absolutely, that's something else. If you want me to talk about, the governor just announcing public school cuts to Baltimore City public schools like weeks after Freddie Gray
Which
protests.
is kind of dumb.
It
shows he's kind of tone deaf, but I understand he's not doing well.
Well, you mean in terms of his health? Or-
No,
yeah,
I mean he's got
was-
some form of cancer. Or something.
non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I think, was announced maybe 2 weeks ago. And we hope, we never hope for anything bad to happen. So we hope he has a recovery, and we continue to have these,
Maybe you
these
should resign and go
conversations.
Go recover.
Well, you got for those instances, you got the lieutenant governor who can step in for those sorts of things. But getting back to the Freddie Gray protest, he announces that education funding that the legislature found money for. The legislature said, we don't have to cut education funding. We found $170 million that we can put towards education, that you can use towards education, that isn't going to cost anything else. But because the governor didn't get his legislative priorities passed in the legislative session, that money that the legislature found is going to sit there. The governor can't spend that on anything else. It's just funding that's there to be spent on education. But the governor, because he doesn't want to spend on education, that I think it's 149 million is just going to sit there while Baltimore City schools are losing teachers, while kids are. This is just weeks after the Freddie Gray protest. That's unethical to me. Unethical. I mean, we
But
need to do more.
sadly, a lot that I would expect from right wing governor. I'm told he's in the same class as LePage up in Maine or Walker out in Wisconsin.
I
Maybe
think
not as
it's-
crazy, but
I think it's closer to Chris Christie and sort of my way or the highway. And because I didn't get what I wanted, I'm the boss. And to heck with all y'all who think otherwise. And, that's the kids in Baltimore City, the kids in Montgomery and Prince George's County are going to be hurt by that, which is really, really unfortunate.
which is the same thing. I mean, you look at Pennsylvania, you've got the Chester Upland School District, which for the last couple of months, 1 year, didn't have any money to pay the teachers.
Yeah.
You look at they wanted to charterize the entire York City School District.
Yeah.
It's the same unfortunate situation that you see with funding across poverty areas, across not just Maryland, not just Pennsylvania, but across the country.
Right. It's a difficult situation. I think there's going to be more on vouchers he's going to try to bring up next year. We'll have to fight him on that because we need to make sure that that the public schools get the funding that we need. We can't give these giveaways to private schools.
I wish you guys nothing but the best out of
Thanks,
this
Rick.
conference. Where do you see things going from this point forward? What are your guys' plans out of this?
Well, I'd like to see a discussion on community schools. Where it's not the polar opposite of a charter school, but I think it does address some of the issues that charters were originally meant to address. Wraparound services, basically addressing the needs of a community beyond the in class at 8 a.m. done at 2 p.m. Because
I got to tell you, I've always been in favor of longer school days.
Yeah.
And longer school years.
Right.
I've always thought experiential. I was always a big hands-on learner.
Sure.
So I'm a big fan of the Montessori method, the idea of hands-on experiential learning. And
Right.
I think longer days and longer school years would give you those opportunities.
Right. And teachers don't become teachers to get rich, but they do it because they believe in the power of education to be the great equalizer. And Baltimore and Maryland is a really good example of this. Maryland is the richest state in the nation, but Baltimore is one of the poorest cities in the country. So you have this stark contrast of abject poverty up just right next to extreme wealth. I mean, the collar counties around Baltimore, median income in Howard County is like $105,000, $110,000.
Wow.
Median income in Baltimore City is 40 if you're lucky, 40,000 if you're lucky. So we're dealing with that as teachers, as educators, to try to level that playing field. And I think community schools are trying to get at this situation. Like, how can we make the educational and life experience of kids who are living in this abject poverty something similar to someone who is from a more privileged background? So you have wraparound services, community schools, services that are available to local members. Things, job training is important, but recreation centers, expanded libraries, expanded educational opportunities. Those are what we're trying to do to try to level the playing field, which I think, and you probably agree with me, listeners probably agree with me, needs to happen. We can have do more to make the playing field a little bit
I'm
more level.
absolutely with you. Todd, I appreciate you taking a little time for us, and I look forward to hearing from you guys again on the work that you're doing, man.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
It was really good talking with you.
Thanks.
Let's take a quick break here from the AFT Teacher Conference here in Washington, D.C. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, and we are going all the way back to the year 1381. That was the day John Ball, the leader of the Peasants' Revolt in England, was executed. Due to the plague, the Black Death, in 1348, many peasants had died. Land was plentiful and laborers were scarce. The authorities responded with emergency legislation, the Ordinance of Laborers in 1349 and the Statute of Laborers in 1351. These laws fixed wages at pre-plague levels and punished employers trying to outbid their competitors. Local lords had the right to prevent serfs from leaving their manors. To raise money for the ongoing 100 Years' War with France, Parliament levied a new tax on every person over the age of 14. This was especially unpopular among the peasant class. The church sided with the wealthy landowners. As a result, some priests rebelled against the church's hierarchy. John Ball was one of these rebels, and for his rebellion, he was imprisoned at Maidstone Castle. The initial outbreak of the Peasants' Revolt occurred in 1380. The people rose up against the new tax. One tax collector was beaten and driven from the village of Fabit. The chief justice, sent to calm the peasants, suffered a similar fate. Word spread, and uprisings occurred throughout England. Rebels in Kent besieged Maidstone Castle and freed John Ball. Troops were dispatched around the country to suppress the revolt. John Ball was hung, drawn and quartered in the marketplace, as an example to any other potential rebels. The Peasants' Revolt was crushed, but Parliament gave up trying to control peasant wages and stopped collecting the poll tax. Many peasants were now considered free men, no longer owned by landowners. All of these things helped to end the feudal system. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the history of the flag of the Confederate States of America and the arguments about it still alive today. William Miles had been appointed to chair a flag committee that would propose the first Confederate flag. Miles had already designed one before his committee ever assembled, but it quickly became apparent the people wanted something more like the Stars and Stripes of the Union, which his was not. So the Confederate Stars and Bars was chosen as the first Confederate flag. But the flag that Chairman Miles had designed didn't go by the wayside, and eventually would become the flag that caught on during the war and after it was finished. It's Mr. Miles' flag with the blue stripes forming an X with stars inside the stripes, all on a red background, that we see and fight about today. Join us again for more flags. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
You're up, you're down, I'll come work you out. You get a good thing going, then you'll blow yourself out. Sitting by yourself, destroyer. Sitting by yourself, destroyer. Sitting by, you got so much to live for, so much to aim for, so much to try for. Blowing all with paranoia. You're so insecure, you self-destroyer.
Well, the tweet that I saw from Wagner's Camera, which you gotta love Twitter. Anytime you turn around, there's going to be an account that pops up. So Wagner's Camera is now being followed by Wagner's Chopper. They have reached out, shaking hands. It looks like I can't wait to see what comes out of this. The paranoia that we have seen. And look, there's so much to this that it's just kind of, well, it's almost too much. To see a sitting state senator act this immature, just kind of amazing to me. So it'll be interesting to see what the Wagner's Camera Twitter account brings up. You got the eye in the sky, looking down, making sure that that everything is wonderful in those schools that are oozing money out of every orifice. And now Wagner's Camera checking up. I gotta wonder if there are gonna be any panty shots coming. Just kind of wondering. Isn't it kind of creepy? I mean, on a certain level, there's a lot of creepiness here. And as I tweeted out earlier, curmudgeon. He reminds me of the guy. Get your ball off my yard! Wah! All the while, and this is what I guess while it's fun and it's easy here sitting in this chair to make light of this insanity, we still don't have a budget. We still aren't secure in knowing that the doors are going to open in the kids' schools. I mean, they will, but will they open with no librarians or nurses, or in Philadelphia where they have just the principal and the teachers? Is that what's happened? All because you've got this kind of insanity going on. And while it's funny and you can make light of it, there's very real consequences underneath all of this. And while again, I look at this stuff and talk about it in a sarcastic, snide way, it's serious. These are the people who are running our Commonwealth. And when the Republicans tell me that they don't believe in government and that government can't do anything right, and you heard Eichelberger come on and say, you can't trust us. Don't trust us. Can't trust us at all because we're going to screw up. I go, yeah. I look at you and You're probably right. You're going to screw up. And what is it about us that put you into that office? That's the weird part to me. We got these people who are doing this stupid stuff. We put those folks there. There were people, the majority of the people in their districts voted for them. And we'll vote for them again because they've got an R behind their name. And the same thing is on the other side. They'll vote for them because there's a D behind their name because, it's team sport. Instead of talking about actual issues and policies, which, I've spent the whole day, kind of railing on the insanity of these cameras. And really, I guess just the audacity in thinking that no one was going to eventually notice, that eventually it wasn't going to get out and this would turn into a thing. And I guess it shows the lack of strategic thinking, or maybe the genius that is the paranoid point of view there, that when someone finds out, that's all people will talk about. And then he can rob us blind and screw things up. That just kind of weird to me. A couple of emails from folks who have taken the time to email me. And of course, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails. Personally, Jenna pointed out, not surprising, he is kind of crazy. By kind of crazy, I mean completely bleep, 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 nuts. Okay, Jenna, very nice for you. Joe says, crazy, crazy, crazy. As Mama always says, crazy is as crazy does. All right, Joe, I appreciate that. And Tony had a response as well. Our guy, gotta love him. And I'm not a big fan, but I do find this is going to be a lot of fun and interest, especially as we have filed a Freedom of Information Act, a right to know request. We want to know what's on these tapes. We want to know how long it's been there. I still want to know if there's audio. To me, that's the big part of it. If there's audio, because if I record you, and this is the part that nobody's talking about, if I record you, it's a crime. In the state of Pennsylvania, both parties have to know they're being recorded. Both parties have to know that, or there has to be a sign that says, hey, you're being recorded. I don't see, in fact, I haven't heard anyone saying that it's there. Interesting questions, things that we're going to have to get answers to. And in the coming days, maybe we will. Right now, I'm looking forward to grabbing as many people to talk about this, because to me, this is an important issue. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Need a president who on day one will approve the Keystone Pipeline.
Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker jumps into the 2016 race. We'll report his predictable position on climate change. Warmest June on record for the western United States. ExxonMobil knew about man-made global warming in 1981 and then funded climate deniers for 30 years. Plus,
jiggery-pokery from the climate science deniers and the right wing.
No, we are not headed to a new mini ice age. The latest denialist theory debunked.
All of that debunking and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
As you may know, following torrential rains, the River Raisin crested today. That flooding recently caused the Monroe Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant to discharge some partially treated sewage. Remember, the sewage is only partially treated, so until further notice, please do not drink any sewage.
Thank you for that advice, Mr. Colbert. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, candidate number 15 entered the GOP race this week.
Yep, 15, count 'em, 15. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker announced on Monday that he is seeking the Republican presidential nomination for 2016. He is the 15th Republican to do so. We've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the 2016 candidates. Now, Walker isn't sure that humans have anything to do with it, and in his official campaign launch speech, he said it shouldn't be a priority.
President Obama declared, he proclaimed that the greatest threat to future generations is global warming, climate change. Well, Mr. President, I respectfully disagree. The greatest threat to future generations is radical Islamic terrorism, and we need to do something about it.
You know, he's no scientist.
So true. Walker also walks the Republican Party line on oil and gas drilling, as well as on coal and nuclear.
We need to put in place an all-the-above energy policy that says we're going to use the abundance of what God has given us here in America and on this continent.
And on this continent, of course, he means the tar sands up in Canada.
Yep.
Which is not exactly U.S. produced, but his buddies, the Koch brothers, are going to make a lot of money out of it.
He also threw in something for the Keystone XL pipeline.
We need a president who on day one will approve the Keystone pipeline.
I love how those people in Wisconsin cheer for the Keystone XL pipeline that brings them no actual money, does not lower their gas price, and probably makes them sick and maybe kills the planet. But other than that, yay!
And so far, Walker is like pretty much all of the 14 other Republican candidates. Meanwhile, it was the hottest June on record for 5 Western states. California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Utah got really hot this June, breaking that record. And that's according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. A revealing new report shows oil giant ExxonMobil has known since 1981 that its product causes dangerous man-made global warming. In a blockbuster new report by the Union of Concerned Scientists on Climate Disinformation, a former Exxon engineer reveals that Exxon's leadership was first informed way back in 1981 that burning its fossil fuels would cause dangerous global warming. Despite that knowledge, Exxon, the world's biggest oil company, spent millions over the next 30 years to promote climate denial.
Well, if you can't beat it, deny it.
Yep. And the latest myth from the climate change denial industry is one you'll probably like. It's that the Earth is headed for a new mini ice age. Of course, reality turns out to be not so much. The right-wing denial media are misreporting a new study that actually doesn't suggest anything of the kind, as physicist Joe Rome of Climate Progress explained on the Bradcast earlier this week.
This study doesn't mean anything about the long predicted global warming trend. All this study says is we have a theory, a brand new theory that says maybe there'll be a reduction in sunspots in the 2030s. And anybody who cites this study to suggest that global warming science isn't real or somehow we are going to avoid catastrophic warming this century literally has never talked to a climate scientist.
Well, of course these right-wing news outlets don't talk to climate scientists because these guys would tell them they're absolutely wrong. And they need to glom on to whatever nonsense, whatever single study they come across and misinterpret it to their ends. That's what they do. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
You might as well be walking on the sun. Might as well be walking on the sun. Might as well be walking on the sun.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
So I sat down at my email this morning and big headline, breaking news. And I'm like, something really important is going to happen. I got to click on this. I've got to find out what the breaking news of the day is. And USA Today tells me the breaking news is, well, that there's no precedent to revoke Bill Cosby's Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the breaking news. And evidently the president yesterday said that he wasn't inclined to revoke the Presidential Medal of Freedom for Bill Cosby. This is breaking news in America. This is it, man. This is breaking news. I guess it just, to me, just shows maybe we've just kind of lost it. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Massachusetts. I got Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, I always love being on.
So should we be taking away? Let's get to the big news. Should we take away the Presidential Medal of Freedom from the guy who said that he bought Quaaludes to give the women so he could have sex with them?
Yeah. Put it simply, I think that seems like a sensible move.
I really don't care.
I guess I don't either. That's why I haven't come briefed on this, but it just seems like why you gotta keep the distinction, have some repute, and I think having Barry Bonds on that list or Bill Cosby or any cheaters, you gotta or rapists.
Yeah. Well, no, look, at the end of the day, I don't know that it's breaking news that we need a special headline for and with, big, bold print and loud voices. I don't know. I just, I don't think he should have been given the damn medal in the first place. Just my thought.
When was that?
I don't actually know, and I don't really care, but I was shocked. The surprising part to me was not that Obama wasn't really caring to revoke it. The shock to me was he got it.
Yeah, I mean, this even came up in the press briefing today that the president had about the Iranian deal. So this fixation, I think it was April Ryan who asked that question. It was like a big multi-part question talking about Selma, criminal justice reform, and Kenya trip. And then, and lastly, would you revoke the Medal of Freedom for Bill Cosby? And the president, rightfully so. I mean, I guess he answered it, try to take it seriously, but he said, you stuffed a lot in there, April. You know what? Good for him to call her out on that.
Well, it was George W. Bush. What do you know? The year was 2002, and W gave him the medal for his work on the Cosby Show. All right, so now we know.
I've got nothing to add.
I've got nothing either. I mean, it was a sad era. It was one I would like to forget. It's an 8-year span that I would really like history to forget and me to forget as well. Just sad stuff. Let's get to something else. What's going on today in the day after the outrage over the Iranian deal? No nuclear bombs have dropped in your backyard, have they?
They have not. I was in touch with a lot of my colleagues down at the United Nations today. It looks like the pathway toward this deal getting really enshrined in international law is just moving really quickly. We saw at 11 a.m. today, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, introduced this resolution to the Security Council. They apparently met for about an hour and they adjourned, and now they are going to deliberate and vote on this next week. So again, we make all this hullabaloo about the fact that Congress has 60 days to debate this, but this is going to be international law by the end of next week. So, again, they would have to undo quite a lot if they really want to reject this deal, which, again, I don't think the math really lines up, and I think that's the consensus. But again, it's extraordinary and really by design, I'd say, that this was going to speed through the United Nations, and I wouldn't be surprised if the president, or at least John Kerry, is up at the UN next week to put this into law.
Yeah, I mean, what's not surprising to me is all of the vitriol that's come around it, especially Lindsey Graham saying, 20 years they're going to be blowing up London and New York with dirty bombs. I just know it. You just wait. Mark it on the calendar.
I guess you're entitled to feel that way. I don't know. My dad is a conflict mediator, and the term that he has introduced to me since a young age is called a BATNA, a best alternative to a negotiated settlement. And there are no BATNAs being talked about. Israel doesn't have them. Lindsey Graham doesn't have them. And it just seems to me all these requests that have been made are sort of demands that folks like Lindsey Graham or Benjamin Netanyahu have been talking about, that Iran have no enrichment facilities whatsoever. It's just completely unattainable. And those who are participating in these or who participated in these negotiations know that, and that's why they try to probably ignore as many Congresses and parliaments as they possibly could in making this deal work.
Now, in looking at this, I had a conversation with someone last night who said, this could be, all of the other things aside about the Obama tenure and his legacy, this could be the big one.
Yeah, I think that's a safe, it's definitely right up there on the foreign policy front. I think this is substantial. Look, I'm not going to pretend that this solves issues in Iran beyond the nuclear issue. I think that's very clear. The arms embargo is going to be lifted even after 8 years. The missile bans will be lifted. And we have seen throughout the process of these, 23 months of negotiations, no willingness on the part of Iran to temper down some of the really destabilizing things that they do as a part of their foreign policy portfolio. They're, pursuing on so many different fronts, this titanic struggle against Saudi Arabia and its allies around the Arab world. That, again, even high-pressure negotiations that were really coming down to the wire didn't convince them that they should stop doing any of that, and this deal isn't going to do that either. So, look, this is the beast that we have to reckon with, this is a 10-year deal, I'd say. This notion that it's really much beyond that, I think, is sort of a overly generous reading of the deal. It is a 10-year cap on a lot of enrichment activity, and I think that still is substantial.
Yeah, but again, in that 10-year period, and I've heard the comments from the other side being that who's to say who's going to hold them accountable? They could be building stuff underground and we wouldn't know it.
That's true, and they would be doing that likely even if we bombed them today. This is a country that has tried for many decades to get away with as much as it can, and I think the IAEA is pretty looking at this from a sober standpoint and realizes this is a difficult actor they have to deal with over the next 25 years. But again, if anyone's equipped to do it, it's the IAEA, and if there's any gold standard out there for inspections that they can put into place, they're going to be using them.
Right.
One of the reasons that there is a 90-day delay between the passing of this Security Council resolution and the first possible day when sanctions could come down and when the IAEA inspectors start doing their work is because the inspectors are actually designing new equipment to be able to do state-of-the-art monitoring here. They're going to have a whole bunch of remote sensors that are in Iranian uranium mines and uranium mills and different facilities that are going to be transmitting live air samples and other sorts of vibrations and sounds back to Europe live 24/7. So again, I just, again, don't know what mechanism you could possibly submit Iran to try and minimize the risk of development of a bomb other than the mechanism that's been employed here.
Yeah. My view on it is the middle ground. I mean, it's the best alternative that, as you pointed out, that you're probably going to get. What's the other side of this? Are we going to go and bomb? Sure. Are we going to go to war? Are we ready for that kind of a decade-long commitment? Is the alternative, I think.
Yeah. I think the military solution here would be very quick. I don't hear many people even suggesting that the plan to cripple Iran's nuclear sites would be a ground invasion of any sort. It would be very precision airstrikes. But again, I think thankfully there's a lower risk of that being pursued today and this week than there was last week.
All right. What's going on in Greece?
Well, we are supposed to get a vote at any moment now from the Greek parliament on this deal. They were supposed to do that today. The European Union demanded that the date stamped at the bottom of the Greek approval would be July 15th. That has come and gone. But I think the biggest development today is that Alexis Tsipras appears to have sold this to his own party. We heard in the morning that the Syriza party council or party committee of about 100 people, half of them had come out and said they don't approve of this deal. And as the day begun to wear on, we saw there was a real separation between those who had the ability just to have a position but not have to vote on it and those who were voting. There are a lot of Syriza members of parliament coming forward who are saying, look, this is, voting for this deal is the best option that's on the table here. So reluctantly and with some very vocal objections, we are going to do what he asks us to do and to vote for this. So, if I were a betting man, I'd say this will clear the Greek parliament. But again, this IMF report, which came out yesterday, detailing just how screwed up the Greek economy is going to be in this bailout deal, is depressing. It is sort of the canary in the coal mine, and I think it's a document, sadly, that we're going to be referencing for many years as we continue to watch the Greek economy go down on its downward spiral. It's a really somber assessment.
And is there an answer to this outside of this deal? I mean, I hear a lot of people talking about, well, the Germans didn't have to pay all their debt back, and yet they're the ones who are demanding that this debt be repaid. I mean, is that where we're going to probably end up, where you're going to have to forgive a good portion of it?
Maybe that's what the IMF says is the scenario that's being created. Look, I think Thomas Piketty's argument is not really fair. The German economy has always been much more important to the European economy than the Greek, and there's a case to be made that they needed that relief, and that doing so for Greece is not quite as crucial. But again, it's crucial for Greece. It may not be crucial for Europe. Right. The IMF's assessment published on Tuesday says very clearly that Greece should get at least a 30-year grace period to pay back these debts, and that is not on the table at all. The IMF has really come out at odds with Angela Merkel and the European Central Bank here in making this recommendation. They go through the math. They say, look, you're assuming foolishly that somehow the Greek economy, which has very low labor force participation, which is very low labor productivity, is somehow, during austerity no less, going to completely turn around. It's going to be one of the countries in the Eurozone with the highest labor force participation. That's going to be one of the most productive workforces in Europe. Perhaps you can claw your way up a little bit by hook or by crook, but you are certainly not going to be up there in the top, the top few countries in competitiveness. And you are certainly not going to see, as this bailout almost necessitates, 3.5% surplus on the Greek GDP for the next few decades. The IMF rightly pointing out there are very few countries around the world that are able to maintain that. And again, it's really improbable, if not, just completely impossible, that the Greek economy will be able to achieve that given all this austerity.
Yeah. And just plain foolish. And finally, what's going on in Yemen?
Well, a sort of embarrassment for the United Nations here. Last Thursday, you had the UN come out saying their envoy to Syria had received assurances from the Houthi rebels. We know them. They've been the ones who sort of changed the dynamic in Yemen this year by taking over the capital and prompting the president to flee. He's now sitting in Saudi Arabia. They also say that they talked to him. They talked to the president in exile. He talked to the Saudi government that's supporting him. And of course, the U.S. is right in the middle of this because we're evidently giving intelligence to the Saudi Air Force, telling them which targets to hit in Yemen. And in the process, I guess, becoming complicit in killing civilians and children. The UN said we'd received assurances that all the fighting in Yemen was going to pause for a week between Friday at midnight last week and the end of Ramadan, this coming Friday at midnight. Turns out the guns never fell quiet, and the UN is in the very tough spot of trying to explain what went wrong. It's embarrassing. The situation in the country has only worsened. This is the reason why the UN is always, there are always headaches at the UN headquarters in the political department because the UN just doesn't seem to have enough clout to be able to guarantee the promises made to it. Probably people are telling them one thing and then doing another. And the U.S. at the same time is also very much in an awkward spot here because, or maybe not awkward, a reprehensible spot. Because on Monday, John Kirby, the spokesperson for the State Department, came out. He was asked, hey, the United States, you knew this ceasefire was being called for by the United Nations. You had seen, obviously, these promises that the Saudi coalition of which you are a part evidently said it was going to abide by the ceasefire. Did Washington expend any effort over the weekend to tell the Saudis to stop bombing? And Kirby was very clear. He said, nope, we didn't do anything of that sort. So again, disappointing to see a very, very needed ceasefire crumble really before it ever began.
Sad stuff. All righty, Luke, I appreciate you taking time for us. I know you're heading up to New Hampshire to cover the clown bus that has arrived there. I look forward to talking about what you find.
You bet. And the lead clown himself, Mr. Trump. I'll report back as soon as I can.
Cannot wait. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Your standard governor, Congress critter, and other elected officials routinely insist that they represent the people. But when it comes to making public policy, do they actually represent you or Mr. Money, who writes big campaign checks? Right. Any pretension that we live in a self-governing democratic republic is gone. It's been snuffed out by a tiny club of big money donors, only about 600 people out of our population of 330 million. They've empowered themselves to choose candidates, control the public debate, and bend public policy to their selfish interests. Both major political parties are complicit in this kleptocratic transformation, Republicans by aggressively pushing it, and Democrats by passively acquiescing to it. While Barack Obama has done nothing to stop this money perversion of democracy, he's at least made noise about making the thieves disclose their theft. But noise is not action, and the GOP's enablers of the thievery have even moved to kill Obama's modest disclosure ideas. In June, for example, House Republicans quietly voted to prohibit the SEC, the shareholders' watchdog, from requiring CEOs to tell the corporate owners how much of their money is being spent on particular political candidates. Another GOP backroom proviso would keep the IRS from disclosing the names of corporate tax law manipulators that use so-called social welfare groups to funnel money anonymously into partisan political campaigns. Also, a third Republican hide-and-seek provision would allow corporations that get billions of dollars in taxpayer funds to avoid telling us the names of lawmakers they're showering with campaign cash. This is Jim Hightower saying, the torrent of secret corporate money in our elections is hosing our democratic ideals and possibilities, blasting the people out of the process, and imposing big money governance over America.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service.
Had we been willing to settle for a lesser deal, we would have finished the negotiation a long time ago. But we were not. All of us, not just the United States, but France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Russia, China, and the EU were determined to get this right. And so we have been patient, and I believe our persistence has paid off.
That was Secretary of State John Kerry this morning announcing a nuclear deal with Iran that's been 23 months in the making. Per the terms of that deal, Iran's nuclear enrichment activity will be capped for 10 years, while inspectors with the International Atomic Energy Agency are slated to remain in the country in some capacity for a quarter century. Right at the center of the deal is the UN Security Council, which will likely endorse the nuclear agreement later this month. Once inspectors deem Iran to be in compliance with nuclear-related elements of the deal, the UN Security Council will peel back all of its Iranian sanctions at the same time. Among the sanctions to be removed, controversially, is an arms embargo, which apparently will remain in place for 5 years, despite no mention of that in today's circulated text. Kerry made it clear that the U.S. didn't support such a move, but that negotiations sometimes require compromise.
There were 7 participants in this negotiation. 3 of them believe there should be no embargo whatsoever, and 4 of them believe there should be a continuation. To have achieved that when 3 of the nations could have said no deal and walked away, or you could have had a different outcome, I think is significant.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradio.news.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
We're back to the Rick Smith Show.
United we bargain, divided we beg. The Rick Smith Show.
Well, another great day. Another day of looking at the insanity, the craziness that is the Pennsylvania State Senate. And I want to thank Scott Wagner for now giving me something to focus on during the doldrum days of them on vacation. While they're off looking up people's skirts and off doing their thing, not passing a budget, I mind you. This gives us something to talk about in the next couple of days. This is something we're definitely going to be looking at. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's covered like time flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA. We see the storm out.